let me know. Is it fine now? Hello, good morning, and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Yesterday, we discussed provisions related to the office of President and the Vice President. And then we initiated the discussion on Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. We have a parliamentary form of government, which means that Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister, they are responsible to, they are accountable to the lower house of Indian Parliament, which is the Lok Sabha. And our system is modeled on the lines of the British parliamentary system, where even if they have a king or queen, but she or he is only a nominal constitutional head, the real power is with the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Similarly, in India, we follow the same structure. Although we have the President of India, but he is only a titular head, is only a nominal head. The real power is with the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Clear? But this is where the President has a discretion. She can appoint anybody as the Prime Minister of India. But then this individual has to obtain the support, the majority in the Lok Sabha. And whoever gets simple majority in Lok Sabha will continue as the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister is appointed by the President. That's the only thing mentioned in the Constitution. Who this Prime Minister can be, who this Prime Minister is going to be, that's something which is not mentioned in the Constitution. So what the President does, she appoints the leader of a party which has won the election as the Prime Minister. If there is no political party which has won the election, then the leader of the single largest party will be asked to form the government and then prove majority on the floor of the Lok Sabha. Or we will have the leader of a group, and this group is called coalition. A group of political parties decided to come together to form the government, and the leader of this group, the leader of this coalition, will be appointed as the Prime Minister. And then only on the advice of the Prime Minister, other ministers, other Council of Ministers shall be appointed. Clear? And whatever advice is given by the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister to the President, that is binding on the President. The President may only seek reconsideration of that advice. But once the same advice is given again, then President has no other option but to accept that advice. And if she doesn't, then it can be construed that this is a violation of the Constitution. And on this ground, she can also be impeached from her house, from her office. But till date, no president has ever been impeached. In fact, never ever have we initiated a proposal to impeach the President of India. This has never happened. Clear? Then we discussed that salaries, allowances of the ministers, the Prime Minister, who will decide their salary? That will be decided by the Parliament. But till the time Parliament enacts a law, till the time Parliament forms a law to decide the salaries of these ministers and the members of the Parliament, their salaries will be mentioned where? In the second schedule of the Constitution. Clear? And what is the second schedule? We will discuss in great detail when we will discuss all the schedules one by one. And there we will discuss, is it violation of natural justice? Is it good, ethical for the parliamentarians to decide their own salary? Or should there be a separate, independent institution which should decide the salary of the members of the Parliament and the ministers? Because it is as if the employees get to decide their own salary. I don't decide my own salary. My boss decides my salary. Although we engage with each other, I discuss, and then there is give and take, and that's how you come about with a salary, with the compensation. But here the parliamentarians decide on their own. What is the percentage of increase or appraisal or incentive that we will give ourselves? Is this good, bad, ugly? That we will discuss in schedules. But here keep in mind the salaries and allowances of ministers. Who will decide that? That will be decided by the Parliament. And once Parliament decides that, that salary will be mentioned in the second schedule of the Constitution. Clear? Done? Then there is something called collective responsibility versus individual responsibility. We say collectively, Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister, they are collectively responsible to Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of Indian Parliament, and that is what we call parliamentary form of government. But individually, these Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister, they are responsible to the President. And this is where yesterday we discussed doctrine of pleasure. That means the ministers will hold office as long as they enjoy the pleasure of the President of India. But this is not the personal pleasure of the President. As long as the minister enjoys the confidence of the Prime Minister, this minister continues. The moment the minister loses the pleasure of the Prime Minister, what Prime Minister will do? Prime Minister will advise the President, please remove that minister from the Council of Ministry. And it is binding on the President to remove that minister. That means individually, every minister is responsible to the President. And President can at any point in time remove a minister only on the advice of the Prime Minister. But collectively, Council of Ministers, they are responsible to Lok Sabha. And there are two implications of that. What are these implications? Number one, Arif Muhammad Khan. Who is he? Currently, he is the governor of the state of Kerala. And he is torturing the chief minister there. But that's besides the point. We will come again and discuss Arif Muhammad Khan when we will discuss the office of the governor. But here we are discussing Arif Muhammad Khan not as the governor of Kerala, but as the minister. He was a minister in Rajiv Gandhi's government in 1985. But then something happened. Shah Bano judgment was given by the Supreme Court, and we have discussed that judgment. In that Shah Bano case, the Supreme Court said that the ex-husband of Shah Bano will have to pay maintenance to Shah Bano not only for 3 months, but for her entire life. Then you would also recall what happened after this judgment. After this judgment, Parliament enacted a law known as Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act, under which the maintenance will be provided only for 3 months, basically nullifying the judgment given by the Honorable Supreme Court. But whenever there is a bill which is to be presented to the Parliament by the government, that is what is known as the government bill. Bill can be either a government bill, which is introduced by a minister, or by a private member. That's what we call a private member's bill. Now, this government bill first has to be decided upon by the cabinet. That means the Prime Minister and his top ministers, they will be part of this body known as the cabinet. And now cabinet will first discuss this Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce bill. Once the cabinet clears this decision, then this bill will be presented to the Parliament. And once both houses of the Parliament passes this bill is sent to the President for his assent. And once the President gives his assent, the bill becomes the law, it becomes the act, it is implemented. In this cabinet meeting, there can be disagreement. A minister may not be happy with a particular piece of legislation. A minister may not be happy with a particular decision which is being discussed in this cabinet meeting. There you have the freedom of speech and expression. There you can criticize the Prime Minister, if at all, if you have the guts. There you can criticize other ministers. There you can criticize a bill. There you can criticize a policy. But once the cabinet has taken a decision, because the cabinet will have to take the decision by majority. For example, this Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce bill. First, it is to be cleared by the cabinet. There can be contrasting views on this piece of legislation in the cabinet. If there is a disagreement, then there will be voting in cabinet. And if we get the majority, simple majority in this cabinet meeting, ultimately it will be construed that this is the decision of the government. So inside that cabinet meeting, you can say whatever you have to say. You can criticize the bill, you can criticize the policy. But once the decision has been taken by the cabinet, it becomes your collective decision. When it becomes your collective decision, that means after this bill has been cleared by the cabinet, then you can't criticize that bill. Then you can't criticize that piece of legislation. And if you still want to criticize, then you have to resign. Arif Muhammad Khan was not in agreement with this Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce bill. He said this would be violating gender justice. This would be violating the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court. In any case, we should not succumb to the radical mullahs, the clerics, so-called leaders of the Muslim community. He expressed his disagreement, but once the decision was taken by the cabinet, he had to abide by this. But instead of abiding by that decision, he basically resigned in protest. He resigned as the minister. Because if he would not have resigned, then he would have to defend this bill. Why? Because that is what collective responsibility is. Collective responsibility means once the decision has been taken by the government, taken in that cabinet meeting, then it becomes binding on all the ministers to abide by that, to respect that, to accept that. If you can't, then you have no other option but to resign. Even if you will still continue to resign, continue to criticize without resigning, the prime minister may ask the president, please dismiss, please remove this minister from the council of ministry. That's what we call collective responsibility. Collective responsibility also means council of ministers swim and sink together. Now listen to me carefully. It's a very important detail. These facts from Parliament, from DPSP, majority of the questions are asked in your prelims examination. In fact, in mains examinations as well. Listen to me carefully. What if, for example, there is a prime minister who heads the council of ministry? Clear? What if prime minister resigns? What will happen to the entire council of ministry? It can be viewed that the entire council of ministry, they have also resigned. So the resignation of one prime minister, individual prime minister, means resignation of the entire council of ministry. That's number one. If the prime minister dies, it means the death of the entire council of ministry. For example, 1984, Shrimati Gandhi was assassinated. She was the prime minister. What happened to her government? It meant that this government had also died. That means all the council of ministry, they're also dead. Dead in the sense, they will not continue. Then a new prime minister was to be appointed. And that new prime minister will choose his own ministers. That means newly, then all these new ministers will have to be sworn in by the president. Oath of office, oath of secrecy is to be given to these ministers again. And that is when Rajiv Gandhi was appointed as the prime minister, and then on his advice, other council of ministers were appointed by the president. That's what we say collective responsibility. Council of ministers swim and sink together. The resignation of prime minister means the resignation of the entire council of ministry. The death of the prime minister means the death of the entire council of ministry. That doesn't mean you have to organize fresh election after the prime minister has resigned, after the prime minister is dead. You may ask someone else to become the prime minister, and then this someone else will have to prove the majority on the floor of the Lok Sabha, because that is what parliamentary democracy is. Council of ministers are responsible to Lok Sabha. But if after the resignation of the prime minister, no other government is possible, no other combination is possible, no other political party is taking claim to form the government, then the president can dissolve Lok Sabha and fresh elections will be conducted, will be held by the Election Commission of India. So what is individual responsibility? The ministers are individually responsible to the president. Doctrine of pledger. Collectively, Council of Ministers, headed by the Prime Minister, they are responsible to the lower house of Indian Parliament, which is the Lok Sabha. And they swim and sink together. Which means if the Prime Minister resigns or Prime Minister dies, it means the resignation and the death of the entire Council of Ministry. Then a new Prime Minister is to be appointed by the President. And then on the advice of this new Prime Minister, new Council of Ministry will have to be sworn in. Is that clear? Let's look at something else. What is the difference between Council of Ministry and the cabinet. You would have come across this term cabinet number of times. In fact, you would not have even read about council of ministers. You would have always read about cabinet. Cabinet took this decision. A cabinet meeting is underway. Prime Minister has called for the cabinet meeting. Now, after the cabinet meeting, what are the decisions that were taken? Recently, there was a cabinet meeting, and then decisions, whatever decisions were taken. For example, there should be a memorandum of understanding between India and Chile when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to agro products. All these decisions are taken by the cabinet, not the council of ministers, by the cabinet. And whatever decisions are taken by the cabinet, then we announce these decisions. And these announcements are basically made by the Minister of Information and Broadcasting. And that is when Anurag Thakur, Mr. Anurag Thakur, the Minister of Information and Broadcasting, he would address the press conference and will communicate to the media, and through media communicate to the public what are the decisions taken by the cabinet. But what is this cabinet? Let's say, for example, this is a superset. If you are a student of mathematics or engineering, or you must have still gone through what is set, subset. This is a superset, and this is Council of Ministry. All the ministers, Prime Minister, plus all the ministers appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister, they are part of this big group, big superset known as Council of Ministry. But within the Council of Ministry, there are cabinet ministers. For example, there is an organization. Clear? The CEO of that organization and all the employees put together forms an organization. Clear? So CEO and all the employees, they become Council of Ministry, for example. But then decisions on a day-to-day basis, important decisions are taken by few important people. Those who are in charge of individual departments. Individual departments, for example, at Byju's, we have the Chief Executive Officer, and then we have all the employees. Let's say there are 50,000 employees in Byju's. 50,000 employees plus the CEO, it becomes part of the Council of Ministry. But then all the employees, they are also managed individually. Individually in the sense, there is one department which is known as product, marketing, brand, sales, content, academics, performance. All those who are the heads of these important departments, they form the cabinet. So basically, decisions are taken by this cabinet, this group of people who head the important departments. Similarly, all the ministers who are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister, they are part of the superset known as Council of Ministers. But within Council of Ministers, there are 18, 20 ministers who head the important ministries, who are the heads of the individual ministries. Those are the cabinet ministers. Sir, it's not clear. Let me make it further clear. For example, we have Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Amit Shah. Mr. Amit Shah is the cabinet minister. Why? Because he heads the entire home ministry. But within the home ministry, there are various departments. For example, there is Department of Home, Department of Official Language, Department of States, Department of Internal Security, Department of Border Management, Department of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh Affairs. Which means Ministry of Home Affairs has various departments. Similarly, Ministry of Finance, headed by Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, it has various departments such as Department of Revenue, Department of Economic Affairs, so on and so forth. Similarly, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Education, so on and so forth. So these are individual ministries. Whoever heads the entire ministry becomes the cabinet minister. But within the ministry, there are various departments. For example, under Home Ministry, there are departments such as Department of Home, Department of Official Language, Department of Internal Security, Border Management, so on and so forth. Whoever is in charge of one or more department becomes Minister of State. Minister of State. For example, the father of that gentleman who mowed down some of the protesters in Lakhimpuri in UP, Mr. Mishra, he is the Minister of State in the Home Ministry. That means he does not head the entire Home Ministry. He is in charge of one or more departments within the ministry. So this individual becomes Minister of State. And Minister of State, you would know, reports to the cabinet minister. Just like in an organization, subordinates report to the manager, manager reports to the senior manager reports to the AGM reports to the GM. That's how the hierarchy works. Similarly, all these ministers, they are part of the Council of Ministry and they are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. But some of these ministers, they are cabinet ministers. Who are these cabinet ministers? Those ministers who head the entire ministry. So the entire defense ministry is led by Shri Rajnath Singh, becomes the cabinet minister. The entire information and broadcasting ministry is headed by Anurag Thakur, becomes the cabinet minister. The entire Ministry of Railways, headed by one individual, you become the cabinet minister. Whether it is Piyush Goyal, whether it is Mr. Vaishnav, whether it is Ms. Smriti Irani, all these are heading the ministries, individual ministries. They become cabinet ministers. But there are some ministers who assist them. Because in a ministry, there can be various departments. So cabinet minister is in charge of the entire ministry. But within that ministry, there are various departments. Those ministers who are in charge of one or more departments within the ministry, those are what we call Minister of State. And Minister of State reports to the cabinet minister. Then there are others who are known as Ministers of State with independent charge. What is this Minister of State with independent charge? For example, there is Department of Internal Security. Prime Minister tells Mr. Amit Shah, you're very busy. You do one thing, you take care of our election machinery because we have to work and win the 2024 elections. Sir, then what do you want me to do? You remain the cabinet minister, but this one department requires more attention, which you can't pay because you'll be busy in the elections. So this Department of Internal Security, I will snatch from you. I will give it to someone else. That means this someone else, X, will be in charge of a department, not the entire ministry, but will be in charge of one department, but will handle this department independently without reporting to the cabinet minister. Then this individual minister who does not head the entire ministry but heads one department in a ministry but independently. The rest of the departments are with Mr. Amit Shah. Only one department is with me. I am independently holding this department, managing this department. I become Minister of State with independent charge. And this group, Council of Ministers, includes cabinet ministers, includes Minister of State, includes Minister of State with independent charge. So all these ministers, whether you are Prime Minister, whether you are Cabinet Minister, whether you are Minister of State, whether you are Minister of State with independent charge, all of you put together will be part of this big superset known as Council of Ministry. But within Council of Ministry, there are those ministers who head the entire ministry, entire group of departments under the ministry. Those are what we call cabinet ministers. And it is this cabinet which meets frequently. Frequently in the sense, for example, I have a team under me. Clear? Now I'm meeting the heads of, let's say I'm meeting the CEO, and the CEO has to communicate a decision to me. Do I include all my team members to come and be part of this meeting with the CEO? And then we will discuss whatever we have to discuss regarding the IAS, for example? No. I will discuss with the CEO, CEO will discuss with me, then whatever decision we will take, I will tell my team members, this is now the decision, let's implement this. That is why whenever there is a meeting of the government, whenever government has to take a decision, that does not mean all the ministers who are part of the Council of Ministry, they will come together and discuss with the Prime Minister. No, only the cabinet ministers will be called for the meeting. When cabinet ministers will be called for the meeting, that means whatever decision are taken for Home Ministry, Home Minister will communicate to the in charge of other departments. Finance Minister, Cabinet Minister will communicate to other ministers of state in the Finance Ministry. That means only the cabinet ministers are frequently meeting and they take a decision. And then they inform these decisions to other Council of Ministers, those who are subordinates to you. So Mr. Amit Shah will discuss all the meetings with his colleagues who are part of the Department of Home, Department of Official Language, all these departments. But yes, sometimes the entire Council of Ministry also meets. This is where the Prime Minister wants to interact with all the ministers together. That's when the entire Council of Ministry meets. But normally it is this cabinet which meets frequently. And that is why you would have heard cabinet has taken a decision. And cabinet is one subset under Council of Ministry. Clear? And in fact, this term cabinet was not mentioned in the original constitution. This term cabinet found its mention for the first time in the constitution when 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978 was passed. Why? I've discussed this with you previously, although briefly, that when national emergency was imposed in India in 1975, Srimati Gandhi as the Prime Minister called the President of India. There was an oral communication through a telephonic conversation. The Prime Minister is advising the President, please impose national emergency. And President did that. At that time, it was alleged that it is a misuse. Why? Because how can Prime Minister take an independent decision? Prime Minister is very powerful, yes. But the Prime Minister does not have all the powers. Prime Minister has to consult with the cabinet ministers. Prime Minister has to consult with Council of Ministers. Then they can take a decision. Then that decision can be communicated to the President. Individual decision of the Prime Minister cannot be communicated to the President. That's the whole point of parliamentary democracy. Because we say we are a cabinet form of government. Prime Minister, yes, enjoys a very important position, very important role, but he cannot take individual decisions. Basically, he has to seek the support of the cabinet ministers. And whatever they discuss in the cabinet meeting, that should be communicated to the President. But in 1975, June 1975, the Prime Minister is having an oral conversation, a telephonic conversation with the President and advising the President, please impose national emergency. And then when Janata Party came to power, because I told you Janata Party came to power with a promise that we will undo all the damages that Indira Gandhi has made to the constitution. And to prevent the misuse of national emergency, 44th Amendment said that if tomorrow national emergency is to be imposed in India, that cannot be done by the oral advice of the Prime Minister. That can be done only on the written advice of the cabinet. So now tomorrow, if national emergency is to be imposed, Prime Minister cannot give an oral advice to the President. It has to be a written advice to the President that President, please impose national emergency. And this written advice should be given by the entire cabinet. And that is how this term cabinet got mentioned in the constitution. So what's the difference between Council of Ministers and cabinet? Simple. All the ministers, including the Prime Minister, they are part of the super group or superset known as Council of Ministers. But within Council of Ministers, you may see a cabinet minister, you may see a minister of state, You may see a Minister of State with independent charge. All of them put together is part of this group known as Council of Ministers. But it is the cabinet which meets frequently, and all the decisions are taken by the cabinet. Clear? Is the Prime Minister's term fixed? No. The Prime Minister holds office as long as he enjoys the confidence in Lok Sabha. He enjoys the simple majority in Lok Sabha. Now listen to me carefully. We have these important ministries. For example, we have Finance Ministry, Education Ministry, External Affairs Ministry, Home Ministry, Defense Ministry. Are these ministries mentioned in the Constitution? No. What does Constitution say? Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President, and on the advice of the Prime Minister, other Council of Ministers will be appointed. And these Council of Ministers are responsible to the Lok Sabha. And whatever advice is given by Council of Ministers to the President cannot be inquired into any court of law. So how many ministries can we have? Which are these ministries? That is something which is not mentioned in the Constitution. But who has all the executive powers? Executive powers are vested in the name of President. What President can do? He can make rules. That too on the advice of Prime Minister. What are these rules? These rules will say, how do we transact the business? What is our business? The business is to keep the country united. The business is to secure the independence of India. The business is to ensure the unity, integrity, and sovereignty in India. The business is to ensure that there is economic development in India. The business is to ensure that we give protection to the tribals. That's the business. And how do we transact this business? How are we responsible to implement this business? For that, rules will be made by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. And based on these rules, we have various ministries. Ministries such as Home Ministry, External Affairs Ministry, Finance Ministry, Education Ministry. And if a new ministry is to be created, for that you don't have to amend the Constitution. Why? Because Constitution does not talk about ministries. Then who talks about ministries? Transaction of business rules. And if you have to create a new ministry, for that what you have to do, you have to amend this transaction of business rules and create a new ministry. And that's exactly what was done in July 2021. A new ministry was created known as Ministry of Cooperation, headed by Mr. Amit Shah. Now, what's a cooperation? There are cooperatives. Which are these cooperatives? I gave you one example of Amul. Amul is a cooperative society. All the milk farmers, they will come together, they will pool their milk, and then this cooperative society, what it will do, it can manufacture paneer, curd, processed milk, anything, any dairy product, and then whatever profit is generated will be distributed amongst these members of the cooperative society. And this is an important thing, because more and more cooperative societies means more and more wealth creation for the people. More and more cooperative societies, which means more and more inequality in our society will be reduced, because these cooperatives, they share the profit amongst all the members of that society. So we should strengthen this cooperative movement. And to strengthen this cooperative movement, a new ministry was launched in July 2021 known as Ministry of Cooperation, which was headed by Mr. Amit Shah. So a same minister can be a minister of multiple departments as well. A same minister can hold charge of more than one ministry as well. That is what you need to understand from this topic. Any questions as of now? Yes, no, maybe? Yes, tell me. Now there is something known as kitchen cabinet. What is kitchen cabinet? What is a kitchen? Where the food is cooked. Right? Kitchen for government is where the policy is cooked. Clear? So we have a cabinet. Cabinet, let's say, has 18 ministers, for example. But all these 18 ministers may not be too close to the prime minister. In a sense, there can be 4 to 5 or 6 or 7 or 3 or 2 cabinet ministers who enjoy the trust of the prime minister. And it is this group which cooks the policy, and that is what is known as the kitchen cabinet. Kitchen cabinet is basically an informal body. This is not mentioned in the constitution. Constitution does not talk about that there is something called kitchen cabinet. But then who talks about kitchen cabinet? Those who view the government, those who keep a track of how the government is functioning. And they say that during the first prime ministership of Mr. Nehru, Pandit Nehru had a kitchen cabinet consisting of Sardar Patel, consisting of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad and others. It is this select group of cabinet ministers who were taking the real decision. And then just for the sake of formality, this decision was placed before the entire cabinet. And then the entire cabinet was asked, please give your approval. For example, during Mr. Vajpayee's time, Mr. Vajpayee relied on some of his top ministers, Mr. Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi, Pramod Mahajan. These were part of the kitchen cabinet. Right now, for example, if the prime minister has to take an important decision, let's say the decision is Article 370 is to be diluted. Article 370 is to be reduced. For example, now this decision, if it is to be communicated to the president, who has to take this decision? Cabinet. But prime minister may not enjoy the trust of all the cabinet ministers, but he would be close to some cabinet ministers. So what prime minister may do? He may call Mr. Amit Shah. He may call National Security Advisor Mr. Ajit Doval. National Security Advisor also has a cabinet rank. He is also having the status of a cabinet minister. He may call Rajnath Singh. He may call Bhupendra Yadav, for example, who's now very close to the prime minister. And these 4 or 5 people will sit together and will discuss this policy. We have to revoke Article 370, or we have to delete or dilute Article 370. This is the decision that we will take. So they will take the entire decision. They will have created all the possible outcomes. Everything would be decided by them. But then as a mere formality, they will place this decision before the cabinet. Give us your approval so that we can communicate to the president. So the real policy is cooked in this kitchen cabinet. And then just for the formality, it is placed before the entire cabinet. For example, if something like Article 370 was to be diluted, which is a big thing, it would have taken a lot of time to come up with the solution how Article 370 can be diluted, how Jammu and Kashmir can be reorganized into J&K and Ladakh, one with legislative assembly, one without legislative assembly. So many decisions are to be taken. Now, these decisions will take a lot of time. Maybe this policy would have been discussed by this kitchen cabinet for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, even 5 months. We don't know. We will never come to know because these meetings are secret. But then once they took the decision, then what happened? There was a formality. What was the formality? Prime Minister on 4th of August 2019 asked all his cabinet colleagues, please come and meet me tomorrow, 5th of August 2019. We have a cabinet meeting. We have to discuss something. They had taken the decision. Now, as a mere formality, on the morning of 5th of August 2019, this proposal to dilute Article 370 was placed before the cabinet. And cabinet said, wow, Modi ji, wow, this is brilliant, outstanding, spectacular. We are giving you the support. We will accept this. So it was a mere formality because the real policy was cooked in this kitchen cabinet. That's what we call kitchen cabinet, but it's an informal body. It's not mentioned in the constitution. This is just how the constitutional experts, how those who keep a track of the government, they say that the real decisions are taken by Prime Minister and select group of important ministers who enjoy the trust of the Prime Minister. For example, Rajnath Singh, for example, Amit Shah, for example, Bhupendra Yadav, for example, Ajit Doval. These are the people who enjoy the trust of the Prime Minister. And this is where the policy is cooked. Done? Okay. Now let's look at what are these cabinet committees. What is a cabinet committee? Let's say, for example, we have to take a decision. Let's say the decision is we have 3 different time slots where we have the classes. For example, there's a morning batch currently, then there is an evening batch from 5 to 8:30, then there is a weekend batch. Let's say we have to start another batch in the afternoon, and we say, let's say 12 o'clock we will have another batch, 3 o'clock in the afternoon we will have another batch. This decision is to be taken. This decision, if it is taken individually by an individual, it will be a quick decision. For example, if this decision is to be taken by me, I'll say, okay, let's have another batch, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's get this done. It will be a quick decision, but it may be a hasty decision as well. Hasty decision in the sense without considering various inputs. So it is better if I ask other important leaders to also come together and let's discuss, should we have a batch at 12 o'clock? Should we have a batch at 3 o'clock? Maybe they would say, sir, who will come to attend this class at 12 o'clock? Because they would be busy in their college or university, or they would be busy in their work. This is not a good decision. So deliberation will take place. Similarly, if the Minister of Finance has to take a decision on all economic matters, she may not take a good decision, although she may take a quick decision. Is FDI in multi-brand retail allowed or not? I will say okay. Is FDI in single brand retail allowed or not? I will say okay. Is FDI insurance allowed or not? I'll say yes or no. I'll take a quick decision because I have to take the decision. But it may be hasty decision as well. It may be ill-informed decision. It may be uninformed decision. Collective decisions may be time consuming, but nevertheless, they may be intelligent decisions as well. And that is how we have got cabinet committees. A group of cabinet ministers who come together to take decisions on important matters. That's what we call a cabinet committee. This cabinet committee is not mentioned anywhere in the constitution. These are basically extra constitutional bodies, not mentioned in the constitution. But where are they mentioned? They are mentioned in the rules of business. Which are these rules of business? Article 77 gives the power to the president. The dear president said, yes, you have got all the executive powers, I know, and you can make rules to decide how do we transact the business. On the advice of the Prime Minister, you can make these rules. These rules talk about creating ministries. These rules talk about creating cabinet committees. But cabinet committees, although these are not mentioned in the constitution, but these are mentioned in the rules of business, the transaction of business rules, 1961. And these cabinet committees can be either standing or ad hoc. Standing means permanent. Ad hoc means for a temporary period. Once that purpose is solved, this cabinet committee is dissolved. For example, in the year 1962, when there was a war between India and China, a cabinet committee was created known as Cabinet Committee on War. Prime Minister, Defense Minister, External Affairs Minister, other ministers, and on a day-to-day basis, they were taking decisions. How do we try and win this war with China? But once the Indo-China war was over, this cabinet committee was dissolved. Why? Because it was not a standing committee. It was not a permanent committee. It was an ad hoc committee set up for a specific purpose. Once that purpose is solved, this committee is dissolved. But how many standing committees can we have? That's the prerogative of the Prime Minister. That's the decision of the Prime Minister. For example, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, we used to have 13 cabinet committees. When Mr. Modi came to power in 2014, we had 6 cabinet committees. Then in the second term of Mr. Modi, 2 more committees got added. Now we have 8 cabinet committees. And we will discuss all these 8 cabinet committees one by one. But first, what you need to understand, decisions, if they are to be taken, can be either quick or time-taking. Quick decision can be taken by an individual minister, but time-consuming decisions can be taken by ministers together, group of ministers together, because you will understand their viewpoints, contrasting views, other views, and then based on all these discussions that we have had, we will take a decision. And it is on this ground of collective decision making that cabinet committees were set up. And cabinet committees, although they're not mentioned in the constitution, but they're mentioned in rules of business. And these cabinet committees can be either standing, which means permanent, or can be ad hoc, which means for a temporary purpose. And once that purpose is solved, this committee is dissolved. Clear? And how many cabinet committees can we have? It is the prerogative of the Prime Minister. It's the individual decision of the Prime Minister. And right now we have 8 cabinet committees. Which are these 8 cabinet committees? Number 1, Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. When you look at all these cabinet committees, you don't have to go too deep into these committees. You just have to look at who is the chairperson. Is Prime Minister? If not, then who? Because if Prime Minister is part of any cabinet committee, then he becomes the chairperson of that committee. But if the Prime Minister is not part of that committee, then someone else is the chairperson of that committee. And who is that chairperson? That you should know for civil services examination. Second, what is the composition of this committee? But some. You have to understand the composition of some cabinet committees, not all. Why? That I will tell you. And then what is the role, what is the function of this cabinet committee? That's all. These are the 3 things that you have to keep in mind. Appointments Committee of the Cabinet is headed by Prime Minister, and there is only one more member who is part of this cabinet committee, and that is Shri Amit Shah, the Minister of Home Affairs. So who is the chairperson of Cabinet Committee on Appointments or Appointments Committee of the Cabinet? Prime Minister. Who is the other member? Amit Shah. Is there any other member? No. Then what is the function of this committee? All the appointments that are to be made to the central government above the rank of Joint Secretary. So there are individual departments at the central level. For example, who is going to be the Secretary of Finance? Who is going to be the Secretary of Industries? Who is going to be the Foreign Secretary of India? Who is going to be the chairperson of the UPSC? Who is going to be the head of Prasar Bharati? Who is going to be a new important member of the bank? All these appointments above the rank of Joint Secretary, these decisions are taken by this committee of the cabinet known as Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and Home Minister is the other member of this committee. So although we have cabinet, clear? And in this cabinet, we have Finance Ministry, Education Ministry, External Affairs Ministry, Finance Ministry, Defense Ministry, Agriculture Ministry, Food Processing Ministry, Railways Ministry, so many ministries, in Electronics and Information Technology Ministry. But who is going to be the secretary of all these departments? That decision is taken by Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. So all the important appointments, who is going to be the head of the Prasar Bharati, who is going to be a new chief of the defense staff, all these decisions are taken by Appointments Committee of the Cabinet headed by the Prime Minister. Clear? Then we have called something called Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. Prime Minister is not a member of this committee. When Prime Minister is not a member of this committee, that means some other cabinet minister will be the head of this committee. Previously, this committee used to be headed by Home Minister. But now it's not headed by the Home Minister. This is headed by, that is Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, sorry. This Cabinet Committee on Accommodation is headed by the Home Minister. And what is the role of this Cabinet Committee on Accommodation? For example, there is real estate. There are flats, bungalows in Delhi. These are to be allotted to ministers. These are to be allotted to judges. These are to be allotted to a former president. These are to be allotted to the members of the parliament. For example, we have now the new president of India. Where will the previous president, the ex-president, whose term is now over, where will he stay? For him, a bungalow is to be allotted. And that bungalow will be allotted by the Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. Similarly, Ms. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, you are not now protected by the SPG, Special Protection Group. So you don't need a big bungalow. So your bungalow will be snatched from you. It will be given to someone else. You will be accommodated somewhere else. Why? Because you are not a member of the parliament. You are not holding any post under the government. So why should we accommodate you? So all these important real estate accommodations that are to be given to constitutional functionaries, to government officers, to ministers, to MPs, that is decided by this committee of the cabinet known as Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. But this is too simple or trivial matter. Why should Prime Minister get involved in this business of allocating houses and bungalows to various individuals? That is why Prime Minister is not part of this, because he has something important to do. Home Minister is the head of this committee. Who are the other members of this committee? Please don't remember. Don't memorize. It is immaterial, will not be asked in the examination. What will be asked is Prime Minister head of this committee? If yes, then he is the member and the head of this committee. If not, then some other minister will be the head of this committee. And who is that minister? You may be asked. And then what is the role of this committee? Clear? Then we have Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. Economy today is doing well, but we say economy, it's a factor of a lot of things. Industries in India, whether they are doing good or bad, it is also a factor of what is the global macro environment. So if there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, it will affect the supply side, supply chain management, and ultimately there will be a shock to the economy of the world. In a sense, it's because of this war that we saw that the cheap credit which was previously available is not available, that the prices of commodities have increased. Variety of factors. That means if the decision on economy is to be taken, it cannot be taken by the finance ministry on her own, because the external affairs minister will say what is going to be the external affairs impact of your economic decision. For example, there is inflation. If there is inflation, inflation may be because of food. That means the price of the food items has increased. Now, how do we tackle with this inflation? Either we import food items from outside, or we stop export of food items from India. And few months ago, we stopped the food item, we stopped the export of onions to other countries. Why? Because there was inflation, high inflation in India. And Bangladesh protested. Bangladesh said, whenever you have to take this decision, please inform us beforehand so that we can also get supply of onions from other countries, because it is affecting us. So your decision on economy, whether you will allow import of food items, whether you will stop export of food items, will have an external affairs dimension as well. So bring in external affairs minister as well, so that together we can take a decision. Not only external affairs minister, bring in food processing minister as well, so that we can tell whether onions or tomatoes or other perishable fruits, What should be our policy on them, so that can we use them for our food processing industry? Can we bring some imports which will help the food processing industry as well? Long story short, should FDI be allowed? Should FDI not be allowed? Should FDI be increased? Should FDI be reduced? Whatever decision on economic matter is to be taken, that decision will be taken collectively by this body known as Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. And this Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs is headed by the Prime Minister. Who are the other members of this Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs? Please don't worry, will not be asked in the examination. There are various other members who are part of this Cabinet Committee, but you don't have to memorize them. What is it that you have to remember? Is Prime Minister head of this committee? If yes, then what is the decision? What is the role? What is the function of this Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs? Clear? Then we have something called Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. And this Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs does not include the Prime Minister. When Prime Minister is not part of this, that means some other cabinet minister will be heading this body, will be heading this Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. Previously, it used to be headed by Home Minister. Now it is headed by Defense Minister Shri Rajnath Singh. And what is the decision taken by this Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs? Parliament is to be summoned. Who can summon Parliament? President of India. Who can end the session, terminate the session of the Parliament? President of India. Clear? But President does not have the discretion. President can summon Parliament saying from this day to that day, we will have the budget session of Indian Parliament. From this period to this time, we will have the monsoon session of the Parliament. From this date to this date, in this period, we will have the winter session of the Parliament. Who will decide that? President. Winter session is ended. Who will take that decision? President. The monsoon session has been terminated. Who will take that decision? President. But President is a rubber stamp. She does not have the real power. The real power is with the Council of Ministry headed by the Prime Minister. In practice, who asks the President, can you please summon Parliament from this date to this date for budget session? Can you please terminate the session of this Parliament on this particular date? That decision is taken by Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. Similarly, what is going to be the government legislative business? In this session of the Indian Parliament, the government has an option. The government has a plan. And the plan is that we want to introduce a bill which will give more autonomy to Indian Institutes of Management, IIMs. We will introduce a bill which will increase the marriageable age of women from 18 to 21. We will introduce a bill which will add more castes to the list of scheduled castes. We will introduce a bill which will add more tribes to the list of the scheduled tribes. We will introduce a bill which will give some sort of financial support to some union territories. All these bills are government bills. And who will take that decision? What sort of bills will be presented to the Parliament during this session? That decision will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, which is headed by the Defense Minister. Previously, it was headed by the Home Minister. And since it is headed by a Cabinet Minister, which basically means Prime Minister is not part of this Cabinet Committee. Then we have Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, which is considered to be super cabinet. There can be a question in your prelims examination, which of the following cabinet committee is also known as the super cabinet? And this committee is considered to be the most powerful of all cabinet committees. This Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs is headed by the Prime Minister. Home Minister is part of it, Defense Minister is part of it, External Affairs Minister is part of it, Mr. Bhupendra Yadav is part of it, Ms. Smriti Irani is part of this, Ms. Sarbananda Sonowal is part of this. Who all are part of this committee, you don't have to remember, you don't have to memorize. What you need to know is that this committee is known as the Super Cabinet. This committee is known as the most powerful of all the cabinet committees. And since it is the most powerful, it can be understood that it is headed by the Prime Minister. Who are the other members in this committee? Don't remember, don't memorize, not relevant. But what is the purpose of this committee? As the name suggests, all decisions which have political implications will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. All those decisions which have external dimension as well, but external political dimension, which does not have internal or external security implication, will be decided by Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. What do we mean by that? There is a change in government in Afghanistan. Previously, it was headed by the civilian government. Now it is controlled by Taliban. So the impact of change in government in Afghanistan will have an impact on our internal security, will have an impact on the security atmosphere in India. Whatever decision is to be taken regarding the change in government in Afghanistan, that will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Security. Because any decision which impacts our security, whether internal security or external security, will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Security. But maybe there is a change in government in United States of America. What should be our position on Joe Biden? What should be our position on Donald Trump? That decision will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. Various political parties, they have revolted, they have protested against the misuse of the office of the governor. Should the governor be reformed, the office of governor should be reformed in such a manner that it strengthens center-state relations. That decision will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. Long story short, any decision, any political decision, because after all, the government is doing politics as well, it's playing politics as well. And politics playing is not a wrong word. It's good to play politics because you are here for politics, but it should not be cheap politics. The point is, any political decision that the government will have to take is taken by Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. That is why it is called as the most powerful of all the cabinet committees and headed by the Prime Minister. But if there is a committee whose composition you have to remember, that is Cabinet Committee on Security. And it is very easy to remember this composition. Why? Because it consists of the Prime Minister and 4 top ministers of the central government. Who are these 4 top ministers? Home Minister, Defense Minister, Finance Minister, External Affairs Minister. All of them put together, they are part of a committee known as Cabinet Committee on Security. As the name suggests, that it deals with security. Security can be internal security. Security can be external security as well. For example, any procurement that we have to make, any defense purchase that we have to make, whose value is more than 1,000 crores. For example, we have to buy Rafale jets from France. Why? Because that is going to help our external security, will keep our external security safe. This order to procure Rafale jets from Dassault, which is the manufacturer of Rafale jets, since this order has the value of more than 1,000 crores, this decision has to be taken by Cabinet Committee on Security. Once Cabinet Committee on Security takes that decision, then Prime Minister can enter into an agreement with other country, with France, and then call for the procurement of Rafale jets. Similarly, if we need S-400 defense system, which is considered to be one of the best sophisticated defense system, which is produced by Russia, it is going to help in our external environment, external security. And if we have to buy these S-400 defense systems, which Russia has given to China as well, Russia has given to Turkey as well, if we have to buy this value is more than 1,000 crore. And that decision has to be taken by Cabinet Committee on Security. But internal security, for example, there is a terror strike in Pulwama. After that, there was a Cabinet Committee on Security. Review the security arrangement within India. Maybe do we need army to be sent to a particular area? Do we need to increase the presence of paramilitary troops? Are there any loopholes, gaps in our security environment? What happened to the intelligence? Did somebody give the intelligence that there is going to be a terror strike, a suicide attack in Pulwama? What happened to that intelligence? Who took action on that intelligence? Is there any failure, any lapse on our part? All these reviews will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Security, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and 4 top ministers are part of this. These were the 6 cabinet committees which were set up during the first term of Mr. Modi between the period 2014 to 2019. And then after 2019, 2 more committees were set up. This can be the question in your prelims examination after 2019, or which of the following cabinet committees are the latest additions? These 2 cabinet committees are Cabinet Committee on Investment and Growth, Cabinet Committee on Employment and Skill Development. And both these committees are headed by the Prime Minister. Who are the other members of this committee? You don't have to remember. Jyotiraditya Scindia is a member of Cabinet Committee on Employment and Skill Development. But you don't have to remember, you don't have to memorize these members, their composition. Just understand that these 2 are new committees created after 2019. Both these committees are headed by the Prime Minister. But then what is the role? The role is, unless and until we invest, whether this investment is a government investment or private investment or a foreign investment, there can be no growth. Growth can only be through investment. You invest in the construction of roads, that leads to growth. You invest in the skill development, or you invest in the ports in India, that leads to growth. So what are the decisions that we should take to attract investment? Because through this investment, it will lead to the growth of India. All these decisions will be taken by Cabinet Committee on Investment and Growth. But we cannot grow as a nation if people are unemployed. And the problem in India is not only unemployment, unemployability. Majority of the engineers cannot be hired, cannot be employed because they lack skills. So we need to empower with skills. We need to impart skill development, and that will lead to employment opportunities. How do we do that? That decision will be taken collectively by a group of ministers known as Cabinet Committee on Employment and Skill Development. So what are we discussing? Union Executive. And in this Union Executive, we discussed President, but I told you we will revisit the office of President slightly later. We discussed Vice President, then we discussed Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers, we will revisit again and again hundreds of times throughout the next lectures that we will have, because these are important offices. And cabinet committees, although these are not mentioned in the Constitution, but these are mentioned in rules of business. Clear? These are extra constitutional bodies, which means not mentioned in the Constitution. And these cabinet committees can be either standing or ad hoc. Standing means permanent. Ad hoc means for a time being, for a purpose. Once that purpose is solved, the committee is dissolved. And how many cabinet committees do we have? That is the responsibility, prerogative of the Prime Minister. As of now, we have 8 committees. On all these committees, you have to remember, understand, is Prime Minister part of this committee? If Prime Minister is part of the committee, he is the chairperson of that committee. If Prime Minister is not part of this committee, then who is the chairperson of this committee? Which means there are only two committees which are not headed by the Prime Minister. One is Cabinet Committee on Accommodation, headed by the Home Minister. Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, headed by the Defense Minister. All the 6 other cabinet committees are headed by the Prime Minister. Clear? Then what is the individual role of these committees? That is something that you will have to keep in mind. And that completes our discussion on cabinet committees. Now we will come to the last institution in this chapter, Union Executive, who is the Attorney General for India. But before we do that, any questions that you have, let me know. So there is Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. He doesn't have any power on this committee. Minister of Parliamentary Affairs is also part of Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. Does PM have any role in committee of which he is not a part? Will his interference be entertained? Prime Minister is the head of the government. So even if he is not part of a committee, he can still influence it. How new ministry is created? By amending the transaction of business rule. So these committees change every 5 years. That's why I said these committees are the prerogative of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister changes, these committees can also change. If Prime Minister wants, these committees can be altered at any point in time. Okay. Now let's look at the Attorney General for India, which comes under Article 76 of the Constitution. Who is the Attorney General for India? For example, Mr. Venkatrami, the current Attorney General for India, we say he is the highest law officer of the country. Who is that highest law officer? You and me have a dispute, and we have filed this dispute in the court. In the court, you will be represented by your lawyer. I will be represented by my lawyer. Clear? Remove me and instead use Union of India, the central government. You have filed a case against central government. Central government has filed a case against you. Now, who will represent Union government, central government in the courts? That person is the Attorney General for India. That means it shall be the duty of the Attorney General for India to appear on behalf of the Government of India in all cases where the Government of India is concerned, and to represent Government of India in any reference made by the President to the Supreme Court under Article 143 of the Constitution. Who is the Attorney General for India? The biggest litigant in India is the central government. Litigant in the sense, the highest number of cases are filed by the central government. The highest number of cases are filed against the central government. So biggest litigant in India is the central government. Somebody has to represent central government in Supreme Court and various high courts. Because if there is a case filed against the central government, there has to be someone to defend the central government. That person is the Attorney General for India. For example, there is a challenge to Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. Who will defend the central government? The Attorney General for India. There is a challenge to Citizenship Amendment Act, whether it is constitutional or not. Who will defend the central government? Attorney General for India. There is a challenge to various rules made by the central government. For example, BBC documentary. It was banned. It was not allowed to be broadcast in India. There's a case before the court. Who will defend the central government? Who will give the side picture of the central government? Attorney General for India. That means it shall be the duty of the Attorney General given by the President that you have to appear in all cases in which Government of India is concerned, as well as any reference made to the Supreme Court under Article 143. What is Article 143? Under Article 143, Supreme Court is the advisor of the President of India, which means President can refer any matter to the Supreme Court, asking the views of the Supreme Court on that matter. And that is what we call presidential reference. So presidential reference is what? President referring a matter to the Supreme Court, asking the views of the Supreme Court on that matter. Have there been instances? Yes, more than 10 instances. Sir, can you tell me one instance? One instance, for example, appointment of judges. What is RE? RE means presidential reference. What is this presidential reference? That means president has referred something to the Supreme Court. What has the president referred? Appointment of judges. This issue, president has referred to the Supreme Court, asking the views of the Supreme Court on this matter. Why? Because in 1981, Supreme Court said it is the ultimate power of the government, executive, to appoint a judge, to transfer a judge. Ultimate power is with the executive. In 1993, Supreme Court said, no, this power is with the collegium. Collegium will send recommendations to the president. It is binding on the president. Now, one judgment says all power with the executive. Another judgment says no power with the executive. Then president was asked by the government, President, can you do one thing? Said, yes, sir. Can you refer this matter to the Supreme Court? Ask the views of the Supreme Court on this matter. Sir, what matter? Appointment of judges. Sir, why? In 1981, they say something. 1993, they are saying something. Ask them for the clarity. How exactly can we appoint judges to the Supreme Court and High Court? And then this matter was referred to the Supreme Court by the President of India. But before the Supreme Court, when it will hear this case, who will give arguments in favor of the central government? Who will present the picture of the central government? Who will give the arguments on behalf of the central government? That person is the Attorney General for India. Clear? Similarly, how is the Attorney General for India appointed? The President shall appoint a person as the Attorney General for India, somebody who is qualified to be appointed as the judge of a Supreme Court. What is the qualification for a Supreme Court judge? Can you tell me? You have to be the citizen of India. First is you have to be the citizen of India. And judge of one or more high courts for 5 years. If not, then advocate in one or more high courts for 10 years. If not, in the eyes of the president, this person should be a distinguished jurist. What is the qualification for someone to be appointed as the judge of a Supreme Court? One, you should be the citizen of India. If you are the citizen of India, then you have to meet one of the three criteria. What is that? Either you should be the judge of one or more high courts for 5 years. If not, then you are a citizen of India and you are the advocate of one or more high courts for 10 years. If not, then you are a citizen of India and in the eyes of the president, you are a distinguished jurist. Distinguished jurist in the sense, you are a law professor of a university. You're not an advocate, you're not a judge, but you are a law professor. And if you're a law professor, you are well versed in the law. It basically means, in my eyes, I am the president, you are a distinguished jurist, and you can be appointed as the Attorney General for India. That means this person who is to be appointed as the Attorney General for India, he should not be the judge of the Supreme Court. No, because then it would violate separation of powers. Because judge of the Supreme Court is part of judiciary. Attorney General for India is part of the executive. There has to be separation of executive from judiciary. This person to be appointed as the Attorney General for India should be qualified, should not be the judge of the Supreme Court, but should be qualified to be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court. And any person who is qualified to be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court, but is not appointed, this person is qualified to be appointed as the Attorney General for India. That's how the Attorney General for India is appointed. So if I ask you who can be appointed as the Attorney General for India, you should not tell me a lawyer. Obviously, if it's a doctor, then the government will lose all the cases. If it's an engineer, then God help you. The point is, you have to be law knowing. But what is that qualification? If you are qualified to become the judge of the Supreme Court, you are qualified to be appointed as the Attorney General for India. Clear? And it shall be the duty of the Attorney General to give advice to the government of India upon such legal matters and to perform such duties of legal character as may from time to time be referred to him or assigned to him by the President of India. What is that legal advice? We want to revoke the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. How do we do this? Mr. Amit Shah can understand the political fallout. Mr. Modi can understand the political benefits that you can reap from diluting the special status of J&K. But legality, they would not know. How do we do this? Attorney General, come here. Yes, sir. Give us the advice. Sir, what advice? Legal advice, obviously. We will not ask you for the medical advice. Legal advice. Tell us, how can we revoke the special status of Jammu and Kashmir? Similarly, Attorney General, come here. Sir, what? I don't like Mamta Didi. Neither do I. But what do you want? I want to dismiss her. Sir, how? That's why you are here. Tell us, how can we dismiss her? Constitutionally, because tomorrow if she challenges it in the court, you have to defend us. So you don't have to lose this case. Give us the solid reason, solid legal advice. How can we dismiss her? So any legal advice which is required to the central government, which the president will ask the Attorney General to give, will have to be given by him. So who is the Attorney General for India? He is the highest law officer of the country. That means the topmost legal advisor of the government. And this person, what is his role? To defend the central government whenever a case is filed against the central government, or whenever central government files a case. To give any legal advice to the government, to help the government when a presidential reference is made under Article 143. But who is this person? Any citizen of India who is qualified to be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court is eligible, is qualified to be appointed as the Attorney General for India. But this Attorney General for India, he does not have security of tenure. He holds office during the pleasure of the president. That means the president appoints you. He may appoint you for 3 years. He may appoint you for 5 years. He may appoint you for a day. She may have appointed you for three years, but after 1 day she may remove you. That means you do not have security, no security of tenure. And this person who is appointed as the Attorney General for India, for example, Mr. Venkatrami right now is close to 70. Prior to him, we had Mr. K.K. Venugopal, who was 90 plus. He was the Attorney General for India. But we have seen that the judge of the Supreme Court, their retirement age is 65. They retire at the age of the 65. So how is the current Attorney General more than 65 years of age? How was the previous Attorney General more than 90 years of age? How is that possible? This age limit of 65, which applies to the Supreme Court judges, that does not apply to the Attorney General for India. So Attorney General can be 100 plus as well. Doesn't matter. And this Attorney General is not part of the cabinet. He's not a member of the cabinet. He's not part of the cabinet, but he is an integral part of the executive. And his salary is decided by the president. Clear? These are some of the facts related to the Attorney General for India. But then this Attorney General has the right of audience in all courts in the territory of India. What does that mean? For example, there is a case going on in the Supreme Court, an important case. For example, whether, let's say, again, Article 370 case, for example, or electoral bonds case, whether electoral bonds are constitutional or not. I appeared before the Supreme Court. Now I'm asking the Supreme Court, please hear me. Justice Chandrachud looks at me, said, who are you? I'm Sarmad. But who? I teach polity at Byju's. Go to hell. Why? Because I'm not a party to this case. Normally, who files a case? Against whom the case is filed, only those people are heard by the courts. So unless and until you have filed a case or against you the case has been filed, you can't appear, you can't be heard by the courts. Now imagine a situation that there is a case in the Patna High Court, and that case is between the government of Bihar and a private individual. Government of Bihar or Byju's, for example, there is a case in the Patna High Court. Suddenly, Attorney General for India walks in. Attorney General tells the Patna High Court, please listen to me. The Patna High Court will ask, who are you? I am the Attorney General for India. Okay, sir, please tell us whatever you have to say. That means this Attorney General, he has the right of audience. He can be heard, he can be listened to, his words will be addressed in any court in this country. No matter where the case is filed, no matter against whom the case is filed, if the Attorney General walks in, the court will have to listen to him. Maybe he is saying something representing the central government. Maybe he is talking about something important. That is the privilege which is available to the Attorney General. What is the privilege? You have the right of audience in all courts in the territory of India. You just walk in inside any court, the court will not ask you, who are you? How are you concerned with this case? Has a case been filed against you? Or have you filed a particular case? The court will not ask these questions. The court will only ask, are you the Attorney General? Yes, now we will hear you. That's the privilege available to Attorney General. That's number one. Number two, something happened in 2019. UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This law of the Parliament was being amended by the Parliament. And now for the first time, individuals can be designated as terrorists by the central government. Previously, only organizations could have been declared as unlawful organizations or terrorist organizations. Now, in 2019, UAPA was amended, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act was amended to say now individuals can also be declared as terrorists by the central government. There was a heated debate in the parliament. Mr. P. Chidambaram was speaking. Mr. P. Chidambaram, who is the lawyer of the Supreme Court as well, he was previously the Home Minister as well. He was the Finance Minister as well. He is the one who started these income tax slabs in 1997, that this salary comes under 30% bracket, 20% bracket, 10% bracket. He was the one who started these tax slabs. But be that as it may, he said something important. He said, you cannot be declared as a terrorist by the government. That designation can be given by the courts, because you are innocent until proven otherwise. The courts will have to look at and hear the arguments, hear the evidence, and then decide whether you are a terrorist or not. How can the central government designate somebody as a terrorist without approval of the courts? He said, who is advising you? This case will be struck down by the court in one hearing because this violates the dignity of an individual, which is a fundamental right under Article 21. I don't understand who is advising this government. Please ask the learned Attorney General to come to the Parliament so that we can ask him questions. What is he saying? Ask the Attorney General to come to the Parliament. Is Attorney General a member of the Parliament? No. Then how can this Attorney General come to the Parliament and speak in the Parliament? That is the privilege available to Attorney General. Attorney General can come inside the Parliament, speak inside the Parliament, become a member of any parliamentary committee as well, except he does not have right to vote. Why? Because right to vote is only for a member of the Parliament. But since Attorney General is not the member of the Parliament, he does not have the right to vote inside Parliament. But he can come to the Parliament. He can speak in the Parliament. He can respond to questions in the Parliament. He can become a member of a parliamentary committee as well, because that is the privilege which is available to the Attorney General for India. Another privilege, he enjoys all the privileges and immunities that are available to the members of the Parliament. On Monday, we will discuss the privileges, immunities which are available to the members of the Parliament. For example, freedom of speech. All these privileges are available to Attorney General as well. Similarly, he can pursue his own cases if the opponent is not the state. What does that mean? Attorney General for India has to defend the central government. For example, are electoral bonds constitutional or unconstitutional? Is the taking down of this documentary by the BBC constitutional or unconstitutional? Who is going to defend the central government? The Attorney General for India. Which means this person, Attorney General, he may be pitted against a top lawyer. For example, Harish Salve, who charges close to 25 lakh rupees for one hearing, just appears before the court and he would charge 25 lakh from the client. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Salman Khurshid, P. Chidambaram, previously Ram Jethmalani, Gopal Subramaniam. These are the top lawyers who charge lakhs of rupees for one hearing. So basically, if a topmost lawyer, let's say Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who charges 20 lakh rupees for a hearing, if he only hears or if he only participates in 5 cases, 5 hearings in a day, which is difficult, but let's assume for a while, 5 hearings, 1 crore in a day. That's not the yearly salary of the President of India. But if we don't pay Attorney General well, then they will not opt for this post. Then we will have only those cheap lawyers who are not talented enough. They will say, okay, we will become the Attorney General. But once they are pitted against these top lawyers, which means the central government will lose all the cases because they cannot defeat these top established lawyers. That is why the provision is Attorney General, you defend us as well, but you can pursue your own private cases as well. It's like a doctor who is practicing in a government hospital, but to ensure that during the day you are practicing in the government hospital, but later after the hospital hours or before those hospital hours, you can have your private practice as well. In the same fashion, the Attorney General, you are not barred from private practice. You can take up government cases, central government cases, but you can also practice your own cases as well. You can take up private practice if the opponent is not the state. Why? Because if, for example, there is a case between Mr. Adani and the central government, unlikely, but let's assume there is a case between Mr. Adani and the central government, and the Attorney General will take up the case of Mr. Adani. But the Attorney General is supposed to defend the central government. Now, if the Attorney General takes the case of a private player against the state, it's a conflict of interest because Attorney General may have the information about this case, may have the central government documents regarding this case. So to prevent that conflict of interest, Attorney General, you are allowed to pursue private cases, but the opponent should not be the state. Similarly, you can defend the accused in a criminal case, but for that you have to take the permission of the government of India. Criminal case, for example, there is a criminal case in Kerala between, let's say, the owners of the bar, of the liquor factories, and the state government. It's a criminal case, for example. That case was on behalf of the bar association, on behalf of the liquor association in Kerala. Their lawyer was the Attorney General for India, Mr. What was his name? Mukul Rohatgi. He was the Attorney General, but he was also representing the Kerala Liquor Bar Association against the state government. How is that possible? You can take up criminal case, but for that you have to take up the permission of the central government, because the opponent is not the central government. The opponent is the Kerala government. So you can take up that case, but please first seek our permission. He does not fall in the category of government servants. He's not a government servant. He's holding an individual constitutional office. He's not a government servant. But since Attorney General cannot be present in all the cases, there can be hundreds of cases against the central government. Then there are some people who assist the Attorney General. And who are these individuals? There can be a Solicitor General of India. For example, Mr. Tushar Mehta is the Solicitor General of India. And there can be additional Solicitor General. There can be many additional Solicitor Generals as well. Those basically who assist the Attorney General. Because Attorney General may be focused on, let's say, Article 370 case. Solicitor General will focus on the BBC documentary case, so that there is no undue burden on the Attorney General. And that completes our discussion on Attorney General. That completes our discussion on Union Executive. Any questions as of now? Let me know, and then we will take a break. After the break, we will take a look at the previous year's question papers. Harshit says clear. Okay. Is BBC case defended by government or Mr. Modi? Defended by government, because government has blocked that documentary. Sadia says clear. Kirubagar, one privileges, please tell. We'll discuss that in Parliament. What are the privileges available with the members of the Parliament? States would have their own lawyer to defend them, yes. And that individual is known as the Advocate General of State. Who defends the central government? Attorney General for India. Who defends the state government in high courts and Supreme Court? Advocate General of that state. I'll give you 2 more minutes for questions. That would make it 7:45. Then we'll take a 15-minute break. We'll meet at 8 o'clock. We'll first discuss the previous year's question papers, and then we will visit the Parliament. Piyush sir, how to cover day before yesterday class topic of basic structure missed out because of emergency. And in that class, we discussed emergency as well. And you got the emergency. You can please go through the tablet lecture. Tenure of Attorney General is not fixed, because that is why I said doctrine of pleasure. He holds office during the pleasure of the President. Normally appointed for 3 years, but can be extended as well, can be removed before that as well. Bureaucrats are also part of the executive. Those are what we call, executive is categorized into 2 broad categories: political executive and permanent executive. Political executive is the Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, but it's not permanent. Today it's Mr. Modi, yesterday it was Dr. Manmohan Singh, then it was Mr. Vajpayee, tomorrow it can be me, if you will vote for me. So these are political executive. Permanent executive is permanently. IAS officers, IPS officers, foreign service officers, and they serve the political masters, members of the political executive. That is why they should be, uh, in a sense, anonymous, and at the same time, they should not be aligned with a political party. They should be flexible enough to serve any political party, whichever comes to power. Sir, how is Attorney General part of executive, not judiciary? Because his work is more related to judiciary. By that logic, my dear, are advocates part of judiciary? They're not. Attorney General represents the executive before judiciary. He is not judiciary. Clear? By that logic, every criminal is part of judiciary because his work is closely related to judiciary. Part of the executive. Why? Because he defends the executive before the judiciary. Okay, so let's meet 8 o'clock and we will discuss previous year's question papers and then Parliament. See you on the other side of the break. Vishnu, why are you always late for the class? Right to audience means the Attorney General can speak in any court, even if it's not the case of the Government of India, can sit in audience in the court, even if there is no case related to the Government of India. Okay, now let's look at previous year's question papers. Be ready. Question number 1. This is the question which was asked in 2021. Let's start a poll. I'll give you 30 seconds. Under the Indian Constitution, concentration of wealth violates what? Read the question carefully and then answer. Under the Indian Constitution, concentration of wealth violates what? Right to equality, DPSP, right to freedom, the concept of welfare. Under Indian Constitution, not according to you. Under the Indian Constitution, something happened with the poll. I'll start it again. I'll give you 10 seconds now. Under the Indian Constitution, concentration of wealth violates what? 91% students are right. Brilliant. Concentration of wealth violates directive principles of state policy, particularly Article 39, Clause C. The operation of economic system should not result in the concentration of wealth to a common detriment. That's a directive principle of state policy, according to the Constitution. According to you, concentration of wealth violates anything. It can be equality, it can be freedom, it can be concept of welfare, but according to the Indian Constitution, it violates B, the directive principles of state policy. Question number 2. What is the position of right to property in India? I'll give you 30 seconds. What is the position of right to property in India? This question was asked in 2021 prelims. You can also start with elimination. %44 students are right. Bhima Sethi, Ayushi, Prasad, Amit, Anuj. What is the position of right to property in India? It's not a fundamental right available to citizens only. You can eliminate C. It used to be a fundamental right, but it is no longer, because it's a constitutional right under Article 300, capital A. Neither fundamental right nor legal right. This is also incorrect. Why? Because it is a legal right. What is a legal right? Legal right can be a constitutional right. Legal right can be a statutory right. Legal right can also be a fundamental right. Any right which is provided by the law is a legal right. Since right to property is provided by the law, which is the Constitution, but it's not a fundamental right, so it becomes a legal right, which is a constitutional right. Legal right available to citizens only? No. Why? Because fundamental rights are available to citizens as well as foreigners. But there are some fundamental rights which are exclusively available to citizens. For example, 15, 16, 19, 29, and 30. When right to property was a fundamental right under Article 19, it was available only to the citizens. But it is now a constitutional right. So it's a legal right available to any person, can be citizen, can be a foreigner as well. That is why B is the right answer. Consider the following statements. An amendment to the Constitution of India can be initiated by an introduction of a bill in the Lok Sabha only if such an amendment seeks to make changes in the federal character of the Constitution. The amendment also requires to be ratified by the legislature of all the states of India. Which of the statements are correct? Let's start a poll. 30 seconds. What is the answer? Let me know. And read the question carefully. An amendment to the Constitution of India can be initiated by an introduction of a bill in the Lok Sabha only if such an amendment seeks to make changes in the federal character of the Constitution. So you can underline the important phrases so that you can focus more on them. The amendment also requires to be ratified by the legislature of all the states in India. 43% students are right. Why are others wrong? An amendment to the Constitution can be initiated by an introduction of a bill in Lok Sabha only. Incorrect. Rajya Sabha as well. Either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Clear? If such an amendment seeks to make changes to the federal character, it requires ratification by not all the states, half of the states. So this is also incorrect. Which of the given statements are correct? Neither one nor two. D is the right answer. Server not working properly for few members. Please check. Prasad, are you speaking on behalf of 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 people? How can you say not working for few members? Can be possible. I'm not denying it, but you speak on your behalf. 2020, with reference to the provisions contained in Part 4 of the Constitution, which of the following statements are correct? They shall be enforceable by courts. They shall not be enforceable by courts. The principle laid down are to influence making of laws by the state. Which of the statements are correct? What's the right answer? Half of the states means if there are 28 states and 2 union territories, at least 15 states and union territories should agree with that constitutional amendment. That yes, we are okay, we are ratifying it. Then it can be sent to the president for signature. %57% students are right. With reference to provisions contained in Part 4, Part 4 deals with directive principles of state policy. What do we mean by directive principles? Those principles which direct the state, which influence the state, when the state is enacting laws, when the state is making policies. That means these principles are to influence the making of laws by the state, correct? But Article 37 talks about 2 important characteristics of DPSP. One, they are fundamental for the governance of the country, but they shall not be enforceable by any court. They shall be enforceable by the court is incorrect. Which of the statements given are correct? D, 2 and 3 is the right answer. Where is the confusion? A simple question. Nandini, you're right. You're wrong. Question 2017. Which principle among the following was added to directive principle of state policy by 42nd Amendment? Please tell he should not advise or hold a brief against the government of India. What is the meaning of hold a brief? You have a dispute with somebody. Clear? It can be on property. It can be on anything, for example. Then you come to me. I'm the lawyer. Now you're briefing me that this is the case. This is the evidence that I have. This is the evidence against them. So on and so forth. That means you're briefing me and then I am giving you a brief. You do one thing. You file a petition under Article 26. You file a petition under Article 32. This is how we will approach the court. This brief Attorney General cannot give to any party which is filing a case against the government of India, because then it's basically cheating. It's like fixing. You are giving them the brief which they can use to win a case against the central government. That Attorney General cannot do. Clear? Now only 18% are right. It is possible. Why? Because it becomes difficult for you to understand and keep remembering and memorizing which DPSP was added when. So this is slightly difficult question, but the correct answer is participation of workers in the management of the industries, Article 43, capital B. This is what was added by the 42nd Amendment in 1976. Difficult question because too factual a question, but sometimes such questions are also asked. 2017, consider the following statements with reference to Constitution of India. The directive principles of state policy constitute limitations upon legislative function, executive function. Which of the statements are correct? Read the question carefully. Sir, why I am not able to give the right answer? Reasons can be many. One, you have not understood the concepts. Two, there's a problem with revision. You're not able to revise regularly. C, you have not attended the class at all. Now you have to figure out what is the reason. 32% students are right. What about the rest? Directive principles, fundamental rights, and fundamental duties. Although these are three distinct separate units, separate parts of the Constitution, then what do? They concretize, they give shape to the lofty goals of the Constitution which are mentioned in the preamble. Fundamental rights are limitations on the powers of the state. Don't interfere. Directive principles are positive obligations of the state, where we are asking the state, please interfere. There is no limitation on you. There is a limitation on the state when it comes to fundamental rights, but there is no limitation on the state when it comes to DPSP. Limitation in the sense, in fundamental rights, we tell the state, do not interfere. That's your limitation. In directive principle, we are telling the state, please interfere so that we can implement uniform civil code, so that we can organize panchayats. So in DPSP, there is no limitation, neither on legislative function nor on the executive function. D is the right answer. Okay. Another question. 2015. Consider the following statements regarding DPSP. Principles spell out socio-economic democracy. These provisions contains are not enforceable in a court of law. Easy question. Tell me what is the right answer. In weekly objective test, out of 20 questions, I could mark around 11 to 12. How is my progress? Very good. Next time, keep on increasing. Very good. It's a good start. %. Why are students confused between A and B? Directive principles, part 4 of the Constitution. DPSPs are for the promotion of socio-economic democracy. Fundamental rights are for the promotion of political democracy. And Article 37 talks about two characteristics of DPSP. One is that these are not enforceable by any court. C is the right answer. Where is the confusion? Sir, I'm confused while reading questions. Don't get confused. Read it twice. 2014, in the Constitution of India, promotion of international peace and security is included in Sir, it's my first class. How should I cover my topics? Either cover from your tab or attend the next batch in the evening, or wait for the next batch in the morning, or attend the weekend batch. Your call. Your call. Now, why are students confused here? C, D. Promotion of international peace and security, Article 51 of the Constitution, deals with directive principles of state policy. It's not mentioned in the preamble. Recall the preamble. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, dignity of an individual. There is no such thing as promoting international peace and security. So it's not part of the preamble. Ninth schedule talks about any law which is immune from judicial review. So clearly A and D are eliminated. D and C, this is where there can be a confusion. That is why I told you, you have to memorize all fundamental duties using the acronym that I've told you. Through that logic, you can say, okay, they don't fit in any category. SSP, ACU, DVD, PR, W. International peace and security is then a directive principle of state policy. B is the right answer. Okay. The main advantage of the parliamentary form of government is who is Ayushi Gaur? She gets every time she gets right. She's your competitor. Defeat her. %53 students are right. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students have crossed 100% accuracy. Main advantage of a parliamentary form of government. Executive and legislature work independently. Incorrect. In a presidential form of democracy also, executive and legislature work differently, independently. So what is that the advantage? How is that the advantage? No. It provides continuity of policy and is more efficient. Now, whether parliamentary is efficient, presidential is efficient, that depends upon the country in which it is operating. Sometimes we can say that presidential form of democracy is more efficient because one person takes all the decisions. No. The head of the government cannot be changed without election. Whether it is presidential or parliamentary, head of the government can never be changed without the election. But there are some states which are constitutional monarchy. They're also parliamentary, but the head of the state cannot be changed even with election. For example, Britain, they have a monarchy, constitutional monarchy. Executive remains responsible to the legislature. C, that is what is parliamentary democracy. This question was asked in 2013. Economic justice as the objectives of Indian Constitution has been provided in tell me. Ten seconds to go. So 60% Janta is correct. Economic justice as one of the objectives of the Constitution has been provided in preamble talks about justice, social, economic, political. Directive principles also talk about socio and economic democracy. That means social and economic justice, which means preamble as well as directive principles of state policy. B is the right answer. This question was asked again in 2013. According to the Constitution, which of the following are fundamental for the governance of the country? According to Constitution, not according to you. According to the Constitution, which of the following are fundamental for the governance of the country? %60 students are right. How? According to Constitution, under Article 37, directive principles are not enforceable in a court of law. Nevertheless, it shall be the duty of the state to implement DPSPs, because DPSPs are fundamental for the governance of the country. So the correct answer is C, DPSP only. Clear? 2017, which of the following Constitutional Amendments Act states that the total number of ministers, including the Prime Minister, in the Council of Ministry shall not exceed 15% of the total number of members of the House of the People? We discussed this yesterday. Did we? Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. Minimum there can be 12 ministers. Maximum it can go up to is 15% of the Lok Sabha. Originally, it was not part of the Constitution. It was added to the Constitution. What was that constitutional amendment? (19, 91, 92, 93). 91 is the right answer. B is the right answer. Another question, 2007. The Council of Ministers in the Union of India is collectively responsible both to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. The members of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are eligible to be the ministers of the Union. Both A and R are individually true. Both A and R are individually true, but R is not the correct explanation. A is true, but B is false. A is false, but B is true. Nine seconds to go. 55% Janta is correct. The Council of Ministers in Union of India is collectively responsible only to Lok Sabha. So A is incorrect. The members of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are eligible to be the ministers of the Union government. This is correct. Mr. S.J. Shankar is from Rajya Sabha, but he's a minister. Rajnath Singh is from Lok Sabha, but he's a minister. So whether you are from Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha doesn't matter, you can become a minister. So both A and R are individually true. No. Both A and R are individually true, but R is not the correct explanation. No. A is false, but R is true. The reason is true. Clear? Done? Question 12. The Prime Minister at the time, question 12 in the sense, this question was asked in 2012. Prime Minister of India at the time of his or her appointment need not necessarily be a member of one of the houses of the parliament, but must become a member of one of the houses within 6 months. Need not necessarily be a member of one of the houses, but must become a member of Lok Sabha. Must be the member of one of the houses, must be from Lok Sabha. %100% should be correct. I don't think so. There are still people who will make mistakes. Only 61% students are correct. Sad, but that's the reality. The Prime Minister of India at the time of his appointment need not necessarily be a member of one of the houses of the parliament, but must become a member of one of the houses within 6 months, just like a minister. And that's why I specifically told you that in case of UK, Prime Minister should be from lower house. But in India, Prime Minister can be from Lok Sabha, can be from Rajya Sabha. Even if you're not a member of either of the two houses, but you can be appointed as a minister, appointed as a prime minister, but within 6 months, you have to become a member of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Okay. Question 2017. Out of the following statement, choose the one that brings out the principle underlying cabinet form of government. Arundhati, what was covered till now? We started with Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Then we looked at what is collective and individual responsibility, who is a cabinet minister, who is a minister of state, who is a minister of state with independent charge. Then we looked at these cabinet committees. We discussed 8 cabinet committees. We discussed their composition, their role, their function. Then we looked at the Attorney General for India. And here 58% students are correct. Out of the following statements, choose the best that brings out the underlying principle of cabinet form of government. Cabinet form of government, where cabinet has the power, an arrangement for minimizing the criticism against the government whose responsibilities are complex and hard to carry out to the satisfaction of all. Criticism of the government is your right. So to minimize criticism, we have a cabinet form of government. It is illogical. That doesn't matter. Mechanism for speeding up activities of the government whose responsibilities are increasing day by day. For that, we should have ideally then the presidential form of democracy, because in presidential form of democracy, decisions can be quicker. In cabinet form of democracy, decisions can be delayed because you have to involve various members, get their inputs, get their suggestions. Then the decision may be delayed, cannot be speeded up. A device for strengthening the head of the government whose hold over the period is in a state of decline. Now, this is a sweeping statement. How can we say that the head of the government, his hold over the people is on the decline? And for that, we need a cabinet form of democracy. If we need to give more power to the head of the state so that he holds the people, then that would result in a dictatorship or a presidential democracy to the best. But the cabinet form of democracy is basically a mechanism of parliamentary democracy, because this cabinet is derived from parliament, because all those who are ministers, they are also part of the legislature, because in cabinet democracy, parliamentary form of government, we draw the executive from the legislature, and then this cabinet is collectively responsible to the people. How? To the people through their representatives in Lok Sabha. So the correct principle is C. C is the right answer. Consider the following statements. Attorney General of India can take part in the proceedings of Lok Sabha, be a member of a committee of the Lok Sabha, speak in the Lok Sabha, vote in the Lok Sabha. This is something that we have discussed now, just now. Let's see if the majority have understood. Eight seconds to go. 70%, thank you, are correct. So we have a lot of students who have made good progress. Where is Shalu? Shalu, what's your score? Shalu keeps on asking the highest number of questions, but she gets the highest number of questions wrong. Don't worry, you'll do good. Consider the following statements. Attorney General for India can take part in the proceedings of Lok Sabha. Yes. Be a member of a committee of Lok Sabha. Yes. Can speak in Lok Sabha. Yes. Can vote in Lok Sabha. Incorrect. Why? Because you are not a member. Which means C, 1, 2, 3 is the right answer. 2018, with reference to the election of the President of India, consider the following statements. The value of the vote of each MLA varies from state to state. The value of the vote of MPs of Lok Sabha is more than the value of the vote of MPs of Rajya Sabha. Okay, which of the statements given above are correct? One second to go. 57% Janta is correct. Prasad is leading the pack. The value of vote of each MLA varies from state to state, correct? Depending upon the population. So the value of vote of an MP from UP is more than the value of vote of an MLA from Sikkim, correct? But value of vote of MP of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha is same. Why? Because look at that formula. The value of vote of an MLA is equal to total population of the state divided by elected legislators into 1 by 1000. What is the value of vote of an MLA? Total value of all votes of all MLAs of all states divided by total number of elected legislatures of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, which means the value of vote of an MP is same regardless of whether you are from Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha. Incorrect. So that means A1 only is the right answer. Now, descriptive questions. Discuss the possible factors that inhibit India from enacting for its citizens a uniform civil code as provided for in the Directive Principles of State Policy, 2015. Article 44 of the Constitution imposes a duty on the state to implement a uniform civil code for all the citizens of India. Although a large part of directive principles have been implemented by the state from time to time, following are the reasons why uniform civil code is still a distant reality. Number one, alleged infringement on fundamental rights under Article 26, 29. Sorry. Second, political considerations. Despite Shah Bano judgment, for political considerations, Uniform Civil Code was not implemented. Then you can cite the example of Law Commission of India, which is in favor of discussion on Uniform Civil Code, but it is not in favor of implementing Uniform Civil Code because of the complexities. Then you can also provide the solution. Strengthen and minimize the loopholes in the Special Marriage Act. That can be a step towards a Uniform Civil Code. Clear? Parliament's power to amend the Constitution is a limited power and it cannot be enlarged into absolute power. In the light of the statement explained whether Parliament under Article 368 of the Constitution can destroy the basic structure of the Constitution by expanding its amending power. 2019. The plain reading of the original Constitution did not impose any restriction on the power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution. The only restriction was vis-a-vis fundamental rights, which cannot be changed through ordinary laws. The Supreme Court, by a majority of 7:6 in 1973 in Keshavananda Bharati judgment, innovated a doctrine known as the basic structure, which imposes limitations on the amending powers of the Parliament. Parliament has the power to amend any provision of the Constitution using Article 368 without destroying the basic structure of the Constitution, which Supreme Court has elaborated in subsequent judgments to mean rule of law, harmony between fundamental rights and directive principle. So under no circumstance can the Parliament expand or enlarge its amending power under Article 368. Clear? Third question, the Attorney General is the chief legal advisor and lawyer of the Government of India. Discuss. 15 marks. The Attorney General for India is the foremost law officer of the country, appointed by the President, somebody who is qualified to be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court. According to the Constitution, Attorney General has to perform all those roles and responsibilities which are assigned to him by the President, such as defending the central government, if central government is party to a case, providing brief to the central government, legal advice to the central government on any issue, representing the central government in any presidential reference made by the President under Article 143 of the Constitution. Explain them in 15 marks, 150 words, you are good to go. Done? Clear? Now let's look at union legislature. So till now we have covered introduction, preamble, union and its territory, citizenship, fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, fundamental duties, the doctrine of basic structure and amendment to the Constitution, and then we jump to union executive. Union executive, we discussed President, Prime Minister, Vice President, Council of Ministers, Attorney General for India. But the office of the President, office of the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers, we will revisit umpteen times when we will discuss union legislature. Union legislature, as the name suggests, talks about legislature which is at the center. Every state has its own legislature called state legislature, which we will discuss separately. We are now talking about union legislature, which is the Parliament of India, the temple of India's democracy. Article 79 says, there shall be a parliament for the union, and this will be a bicameral legislature. Bicameral in the sense, it will have two houses. One, Council of States, which is known as, the Hindi term is Rajya Sabha, House of the People. Sabha means house, Lok is people, Lok Sabha is the Hindi translation of House of the People. So the Parliament consists of Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha and the President of India. So President is an integral part of both executive as well as legislature. Just like ministers, Prime Minister, other ministers, they are part of the executive, but at the same time, they are part of the legislature. Why? Because we follow parliamentary form of democracy. And in a parliamentary form of democracy, executive is drawn from the legislature. So the Parliament of India, which is the Union Parliament, consists of President, Rajya Sabha, and the Lok Sabha. What is the role? What are the functions performed by the Parliament? Role number one is lawmaking. What is lawmaking? We have something called Schedule 7 of the Constitution, which we have discussed previously. Schedule 7 distributes the subjects into union list, state list, and the concurrent list. When we say what is the function of the Indian Parliament, function number one is lawmaking, which means Parliament is the lawmaking body which makes laws on what subjects? Those items which are mentioned in the union list, for example, defense, banking, insurance, citizenship, and those items which are mentioned in the concurrent list, for example, marriage, for example, divorce, for example, civil procedure, for example, criminal procedure, for example, education. So role number one of the Union Parliament or the Union Legislature is to legislate, is to make laws. On what items? Those subjects which are mentioned, which are part of union list and concurrent list. That's number one. Role number two is it also has its constituent power. What is the constituent power? For example, who has drafted the constitution? Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was responsible for making the constitution, drafting the constitution. But if there are some changes to be made to the constitution, for that, do we need to set up another constituent assembly? Or the same parliament elected by the people will have the power to make changes to the constitution, amend the constitution. It's the same power given to the parliament. That means the same institution, parliament, apart from making laws on any item mentioned in the union list and concurrent list, it will also have a constituent power to amend the constitution. Until now, 105 times the Parliament of India has amended the constitution. That means to amend the constitution, for that we don't need a separate constituent assembly. To amend the constitution, that power is given to the parliament itself. And yes, there is a limitation on the power of the parliament. It cannot destroy and violate the basic structure. But it has the power to amend those provisions of the constitution which are not part of the basic structure. Third function, it is the custodian of public purse. Purse stores money. Public money is stored where? Consolidated Fund of India, which we will discuss in this chapter, Union Parliament, possibly on Tuesday. So basically all the money which is raised by the government of India, all the investments which are raised by the government of India, all the taxes which are imposed by the government of India, they get deposited into a fund known as Consolidated Fund of India. So Consolidated Fund of India is like public purse, where public money is stored. Government cannot withdraw even a single penny from this purse, from this Consolidated Fund of India, without approval of the Parliament. Parliament has to allow the government to withdraw money from this public purse. So who is the custodian? Who is the gatekeeper of this public money? That is the Parliament. That is role number 3. Role number 4, it is the source of authentic information. Where do you get the authentic information from? Definitely not from the Republic TV every 9 o'clock. Arnab Goswami, does he come on 9 o'clock now, or he's there since 7 o'clock? I don't know. I don't watch news channels now. You should also not watch. Possibly you can watch the Sunset TV, or you can watch the debates on, let's say, written debates on Indian Express, The Hindu, PRS. Don't watch the TV. But be that as it may, if we need authentic information on a particular subject, the source of that authentic information is the Parliament. Parliamentarians ask questions to the government. Please tell us, how many love jihad cases are there in India? The government said, we don't have any data. That means we don't track these love jihad cases. There is love jihad according to Republic TV and other news channels, but there is no love jihad according to the Parliament, because they don't track this development. Which means if we need authentic information on something, the authentic information comes from the Parliament. How many COVID-19, how many patients, how many individuals died because of COVID-19? If for that we need authentic information, for that we need to ask question to the minister, and inside the Parliament, minister cannot lie. So we need authentic information. For that, we have to go to the Parliament. At the same time, Parliament supplies the executive. Who is the Prime Minister? Part of the legislature. Who is a minister? Part of the legislature. So what is the role of the legislature? To supply executive, to give us the executive. That's another role. And it also plays some quasi judicial functions. What are these quasi-judicial functions? For example, Parliament will have the power to impeach the President of India, investigate allegations against the President, and then decide whether the President is guilty or not, and then impeach him. It's not a judicial function, it's a quasi-judicial function, which we have discussed in impeachment. Removal of the judges of the Supreme Court, High Court, CEC, CAG, all these removal processes are initiated in the Parliament. So Parliament has another role, which is a quasi-judicial function. Long story short, if somebody asks you, or if there's a question asked in the examination, what are the multifarious roles and responsibilities performed by the Parliament? These are the 6 points which you can elaborate. It is the supreme lawmaking body of the central government, makes laws on any item mentioned in the union list and concurrent list. It has a constituent power as well. That means to amend the constitution, subject to basic structure. It's the source of authentic information. It is the custodian of the public purse. It supplies the executive. And it also has some quasi-judicial functions. These are multifarious, multiple roles and responsibilities and functions of the Indian Parliament. An Indian Parliament consists of President, Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. President we have discussed, although not completely, but we have discussed. Now we will first look at Rajya Sabha, then we will look at Lok Sabha, and then we will combine the three together. And then we will discuss the entire part of Parliament in great detail. First up, let's look at Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha, English name, I'll reiterate, is the Council of States. First, we will look at what is the composition of Rajya Sabha. What is the composition? Maximum strength of Rajya Sabha is 245. Sorry, maximum strength is 250. Existing strength is 245. That means maximum we can have 250 MPs in Rajya Sabha. Right now the structure is such, we have 245 MPs. Existing strength is 245. Out of these 245, 12 are nominated. Nominated by the President from the fields of art, literature, science, social service, and the remaining are elected. 233 are elected from states, elected from those union territories which have a legislative assembly, which basically means union territories without legislative assembly are not represented in the Rajya Sabha. Clear? So out of 245, 233 are to be elected from states and those union territories where we have a legislative council, legislative assembly, and 12 are nominated by the President. Who are these 12 nominated MPs to Rajya Sabha? Those who have contributed significantly in the field of art, in the field of literature, in the field of social service, in the field of science. So Rajya Sabha, what it does, it provides opportunity to talented individuals talented individuals from this nominated category to also become part of the lawmaking process. To make laws in India, you have to be part of the parliament. Clear? To be part of the parliament, you have to win an election. And to win an election, you have to go to the people, campaign for the votes, and ask people to vote for me. And unfortunately, in India, you have to polarize people in the name of religion, in the name of caste. You need a lot of muscle power, some gundas which can push people to polling booths to vote for you. You need money power so that you can bribe voters to vote for you. So you need a lot of things to contest and win an election and then be part of parliament and then become part of the lawmaking process. But then there are those individuals who are talented individuals, but they cannot go through the dust of the elections. They cannot polarize people in the name of religion or caste. They can't have gundas who can convince people to vote for you. They don't have money, or they can't spend money to bribe voters because that would be unethical for them. But we still need some talented people. We still need such talented people to also become part of the lawmaking bodies, to also be part of the lawmaking exercise. And that is what the Constitution provides. It provides for an opportunity to these talented individuals who have performed well in various fields such as art, literature, science, social service. You can also come and be part of the lawmaking exercise without having to win an election, without going through the dust and the turmoil of elections. You can come, be part of the parliament, be part of the lawmaking exercise through the nominated route, not through the elected route. That is why 12 MPs are to be nominated by the president to the Rajya Sabha from fields such as art, literature, science, social service. But sir, how is Mary Kom part of the nominated category in Rajya Sabha? How Sachin Ramesh Tendulkar was nominated to the Rajya Sabha? This category, art, literature, science, social service, this list is not an exhaustive list, but this is an illustrative list. Who said this? Noted constitutional expert Soli Sorabji. What Soli Sorabji said, when you look at this phrase that president can nominate 12 MPs to Rajya Sabha from the fields of art, literature, science, social service, that does not mean that president cannot nominate those who have done well in sports, or those who have done well in judiciary, or those who have done well in other areas other than art, literature, science, social service. This list is only an illustrative list. Illustrative list in the sense, for example, if you were to ask me, sir, what are the important chapters of Lakshmikant? I will tell you, you have to study chapters such as preamble, fundamental rights, directive principles, fundamental duties, so on and so forth. When I give you these examples, it is only an illustration that you have to read subjects, read topics, read chapters such as preamble, union and its territory, citizenship, fundamental rights. That doesn't mean those topics which I'm not telling you, you don't have to read them. You have to read elections. You have to read judiciary. You have to read Panchayati Raj institutions. You have to read the CAG. You have to read the UPSC. You have to read other provisions of the Constitution. I was just giving you an example that these are the chapters that you have to study from M. Lakshmikant. Similarly, when Constitution says that 12 MPs to Rajya Sabha are nominated by the president from the fields art, literature, science, social service, that does not mean that the president will have to restrict his choices or her choices only to these 4 areas. She can nominate people who have done well in any field, such as art, literature, science, social service, which can be any other field as well. It can be sports, it can be entertainment, it can be any other area. Clear? 100%? So Rajya Sabha, we say, is the Council of States. It is the upper house of the parliament. We also call Rajya Sabha as the House of Elders. Why House of Elders? I'll tell you slightly later. First, we will look at the composition of Rajya Sabha. maximum strength is 250. The existing strength is 245. Clear? Maximum it can go up to is 250. Right now it is 245. Although right now it is not even 245, it is less than that. But the existing strength we say is 245. Out of 245, 233 are to be elected by states and those union territories which have a legislative assembly. And the remaining 12 are nominated by the president from the fields such as art, literature, science, social service, so that these talented individuals are also made part of the lawmaking body to make laws for the betterment of the people of this country, because these are experts. These are good, talented individuals, and we need them. Clear? Now, how are these 233 people elected by the states and union territories? For that, we need to understand Schedule 4 of the Constitution. What does Schedule 4 talk about? It talks about representation of states in the Rajya Sabha. That means UP will have 31 MPs in Rajya Sabha. Where is it mentioned? Schedule 4 of the Constitution. Telangana will have 7 MPs to Rajya Sabha. Where is it mentioned? Schedule 4 of the Constitution. Delhi will have 4 MPs in Rajya Sabha. Where is it mentioned? Schedule 4 of the Constitution. But how are these MPs elected? What is the election process? Listen to me carefully. For example, this is Gujarat. And in Gujarat, we have 300 MLAs. And let's say in Gujarat, we have 3 vacancies. That means we have to elect 3 MPs to Rajya Sabha from the state of Gujarat. 3 plus 1 plus 1. What is the number? 300 divided by 4, 75. 75 plus 1, 76. That means whoever gets 76 votes will get elected to Rajya Sabha from Gujarat. What does that mean? There is a state of Gujarat. What is their representation in Rajya Sabha? For example, let's say they have 3 representatives in Rajya Sabha. Now, in order to elect 3 MPs from Gujarat state to Rajya Sabha, we need to organize elections. Who will organize elections? Election Commission of India. And Election Commission of India says whoever gets 76 votes in this election will be elected to Rajya Sabha. 76 votes. Why? Because this is the formula that is used. Let's say in this Gujarat Legislative Assembly, because who will vote to elect these 3 MPs to Rajya Sabha? Not the people of Gujarat directly. People of Gujarat through their representatives in the Legislative Assembly. So Gujarat MLAs, Gujarat Legislative Assembly MLAs and members, they will vote to elect 3 MPs to Rajya Sabha from Gujarat. Let's assume that in Gujarat Legislative Assembly, out of 300 MLAs, the BJP has, for example, 152 MLAs. Or let's say it has 76 into 2, 152. Let's say it has 150 MLAs. Clear? Indian National Congress has 80 MLAs. Aam Aadmi Party 180, 230 has 70 MLAs. Clear? And now how many candidates do we have to elect to Rajya Sabha from Gujarat? 3. That means there will be 3 MPs who will be elected to Rajya Sabha from the state of Gujarat. And now the voting will take place. Who will vote? MLAs. What is the vote that a person has to get? How many votes that a person candidate has to get in order to get elected to Rajya Sabha? 76. Which means by looking at this number, Indian National Congress will be able to send one MP to Rajya Sabha, but now it will have a surplus 4 votes. Aam Aadmi Party in itself is not able to send anybody. Why? Because it does not have 76 votes. BJP, for example, it is able to send one MP to Rajya Sabha, but now he has extra votes. The BJP has extra votes. How many extra votes? 76 into 2 means 152. It still has, it is too short of another candidate. Now, in this Rajya Sabha election, just like president's election, all the voters, all the MLAs will be given ballot papers. On one hand, you have the candidate. On the other hand, you have the preference. Now, let's say there are 4 candidates contesting the election. 2 candidates are set up by the BJP, candidate A, candidate B. 1 candidate set up by the Congress, 1 candidate set up by the Aam Aadmi Party. Now, this is where directive will be issued by the political parties to their MLAs. All BJP MLAs, you vote for your candidates. Congress MLAs, you vote for your candidate. Aam Aadmi Party MLAs, you vote for your candidate. That means first preference to A, second preference to B, third preference to C, fourth preference to D. Or if I am a BJP MLA, BJP will tell me that we have 2 candidates, candidate X and candidate Y. 76 MLAs, do you know what you have to do? What, sir? You give first preference to X and you give remaining, whatever is left. We have the remaining candidates. We have 74 more votes. You give first preference to Y. Congress will say, you give first preference to candidate C. That means all 80 MLAs will vote for candidate C. Aam Aadmi Party will say, all the 70 MLAs will give first preference to D. When we will count these first preference votes, now A and C, they are the winners. Why? Because A gets 76 votes. C also gets 76 votes. A is from the BJP, C is from the Congress. Now, those who voted for their first preference have been counted. But those who gave first preference to D, these 70 MLAs, what was their second preference? Those who voted for B as their first preference, it's only 74 votes. But are there other MLAs who gave second preference to B? Then their votes will be transferred. When their votes will be transferred, B will be the next MP elected to Rajya Sabha from the state of Gujarat. Which means in the Rajya Sabha, the election takes place through proportional representation system. Which basically means if there is election to Rajya Sabha from Delhi, Delhi has 4 MPs in Rajya Sabha. Delhi has 4 representatives in Rajya Sabha. If we have to elect 4 MPs to Rajya Sabha from Delhi, all 4 of them will be from the Aam Aadmi Party. Why? In proportion to your strength in the Legislative Assembly, those many candidates you can have in Rajya Sabha. For example, if there is election from Punjab to Rajya Sabha, which means Punjab MLAs will vote, all of them will be from Aam Aadmi Party. That is how Raghav Chadha became member of Rajya Sabha. That is how Harbhajan Singh became member of Rajya Sabha. They are from the Aam Aadmi Party. Because in proportion to your strength in the Legislative Assembly, those many MPs you can have in Rajya Sabha. which means even without the election, even before the election, we come to know which political party will win how many seats in this Rajya Sabha election. So long story short, the election process in Rajya Sabha is like this. Election will be organized by Election Commission of India. Now we will have to see the vacancies. How do we see the vacancies? By looking at the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, because that Schedule 4 talks about representation of states in the Rajya Sabha. And now we'll have to calculate the minimum votes that are required for a candidate in order to get elected to Rajya Sabha. For that, what is the formula? Total number of MLAs divided by vacancies plus 1 plus 1. Which means, for example, if it is in Delhi, Delhi has 70 MLAs, 4 vacancies in or 4 seats in Rajya Sabha, 4 plus 1, which means 70 by 5 plus 1. What is the number? Which means 12, 13, close to 14 votes, right? Or 40 or 15 votes. 5, 15. Yes, close to 15 votes. Whoever gets 15 votes will be the candidate, will be the representative of Delhi in the Rajya Sabha. But in the Delhi Legislative Assembly, Aam Aadmi Party has 62 MLAs. BJP has 8 MLAs. That means whenever election is conducted to Rajya Sabha from Delhi, all 4 candidates will be from the Aam Aadmi Party, because the minimum votes required are 15. So what Aam Aadmi Party will say, these are our 4 candidates. So first 15 MLAs, you vote, give first preference to A. You give first preference to B. You give first preference to C. You give first preference to D. When the first preference votes are counted, we see A, B, C, D are the winners, because all of them, they get the required number of votes. BJP will not be able to win any seat because it does not have the minimum number of MLAs in Legislative Assembly. And Congress cannot even think of it, cannot even dream of getting an MP in the Rajya Sabha from Delhi, because they have 0 in Delhi Legislative Assembly. So using this formula, total MLAs divided by vacancies plus 1 plus 1. This formula will tell us what is the minimum number of votes required for a candidate to win the election. Which means members of Rajya Sabha are elected by the MLAs of the Legislative Assembly using the system called proportional representation system. And we also do something known as open ballot. Open ballot in the sense, whenever I, as the member of the Aam Aadmi Party, will have to vote for a candidate, I have to show it to my representative. See, I'm voting for Aam Aadmi Party. You told me to vote for this candidate. I'm voting for this candidate. So voting takes place not through secret ballot. Voting takes place through open ballot. That's how the election is conducted. Any questions? Yes, Chaitanya, it's through open ballot. Sir, but without second preference, MLAs can vote. Then how can B win? Let's say, for example, this is where Congress and the BJP, they will have a match. They will come together. See, the contest is always between you and me. We don't want a third player to enter the contest, Aam Aadmi Party. So if you are 4 short, we have extra 4 votes. We will ask our MLAs to give second preference to your candidate, so that under no circumstance an Aam Aadmi Party candidate becomes a member of Rajya Sabha. So Congress MLAs will give their first preference to its candidate, but second preference to the BJP candidate. So that even after first preference, if we have 2 winners, but third winner we haven't. Why? Because nobody gets highest number of first preference votes, or the required number, 76 votes. But then we will count the second preference votes. And all the Congress MLAs would give second preference to the BJP candidate. BJP candidate is the winner. Aam Aadmi Party is crying. Cheating. Clear? So this is the game of the second preference votes. That is what we call in Rajya Sabha election. The election is done through a proportional representation system by means of single transferable vote, but through open ballot. Can MLCs participate in this voting? No. Is the Schedule 4 number of UTs representatives also mentioned? Yes, Delhi is a union territory. It has 4 MPs in Rajya Sabha, mentioned in Schedule 4. Puducherry is a union territory. It has 1 MP in the Rajya Sabha, mentioned in the Schedule 4. Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory. It will have 3 MPs in Rajya Sabha, mentioned in the Schedule 4 of the Constitution. Okay. In Rajya Sabha, then what is the qualification for someone in order to contest Rajya Sabha election? Qualification is, number 1, you should be the citizen of India. Number 2, must have completed 30 years of age. Number 3, should be a registered voter. In any parliamentary constituency in India. And at the same time should not be holding any office of profit. What is this office of profit? We will discuss on Monday. But what are the qualifications required in order to contest Rajya Sabha election? First, you should be the citizen of India. Second, you must have completed 30 years of age. And third, you should be a registered voter in any parliamentary constituency in India. Till 2003, if you wanted to become a Rajya Sabha MP from Karnataka, you should have been a registered voter in Karnataka. If you wanted to become a Rajya Sabha MP from Assam, you should have been a registered voter in Assam. But in the year 2003, it was changed. Changed in the sense, now you can be a registered voter in any parliamentary constituency of this country, and you are eligible to contest Rajya Sabha election. Which means Dr. S.J. Shankar, he is not a registered voter in Gujarat. Even then, he represents Gujarat in Rajya Sabha, because Dr. S.J. Shankar is a registered voter in some other parliamentary constituency in India. Dr. Manmohan Singh, he was a registered voter. He is a registered voter in Delhi, but he was representing the state of Assam for 15 years in Rajya Sabha. Why? Because you should be the voter, registered voter in any parliamentary constituency of India. Previously, till 2003, the requirement was you should be the registered voter of that state of which you want to become a Rajya Sabha MP. Now that is not the qualification. You should be a registered voter in any parliamentary constituency of India. And this Rajya Sabha has got some special powers. What are these special powers of Rajya Sabha? Number 1, Article 67, Clause B. What is Article 67, Clause B? Can anybody tell me? Because we discussed this yesterday. Removal of the Vice President. How is the Vice President removed? Vice President is removed. The process has to initiate in Rajya Sabha. So that's a special power of Rajya Sabha. This process of removal of Rajya Sabha, of Chair Vice President, cannot be initiated in Lok Sabha. This is a special power of Rajya Sabha. So to remove the Vice President of India, the resolution must be initiated in Rajya Sabha, should be passed by Rajya Sabha by effective majority, and then agreed to Lok Sabha by simple majority. So to remove the Vice President of India, the process has to initiate only in Rajya Sabha. That is the special power of Rajya Sabha. That's special power number 1. Special power number 2, Article 249. What is Article 249? I told you that there is some distribution of powers. Union list, state list, concurrent list. Who has the power to make a law on union list? Parliament. Who has the power to make a law on concurrent list? Both parliament as well as state legislature. But who has the power to make a law under state list? State legislature. Can parliament make a law on state legislature? Yes. For that, Rajya Sabha should pass a resolution allowing the parliament to legislate on state list. This is the special power of the Rajya Sabha. Without Rajya Sabha's approval, if Rajya Sabha does not pass a resolution under Article 249, then Parliament cannot make a law on state list. So for Parliament to be empowered, to be allowed to make a law in state list, Rajya Sabha has to pass a resolution. That's special power number 2. And special power number 3, Article 312. What is Article 312? All India service. How many All India services do we have? We have 3 All India services. Which are these 3? IAS, IPS, and Indian Forest Service. These are the 3 All India services that we have. Others are central services. For example, Indian Information Service. For example, Indian Ordnance Service. For example, Indian Railway Police Service. For example, Indian Account Service. For example, Indian Revenue Service. All these are central services. We have got only 3 All India services: IAS, IPS, and Forest Service. What is this All India service? We'll discuss this in governance, but here briefly, these IAS officers, IPS officers, Forest Service officers, who appoints them? Center. Who trains them? Center. Who has the power to remove them? Center. Who has the power to dismiss them? Center. Who are they accountable to? Center. But where do they work? They work in the states. They work in West Bengal. They work in Karnataka. They work in Chhattisgarh. They work in Punjab. That means they work in the states. But officers are appointed by the center, but they are working in the state. Will these officers not be biased in favor of the central government? Will that not violate federalism and weaken federalism? Where officers are working in the state government, but they are accountable to the central government. So IAS officers, they are one of the unitary features of Indian federalism. All India service officers, they are unitary features of Indian federalism because they give more powers to the center as against the states. If a new All India service is created, let's say All India Service on Education is created, Indian Education Service is created, or Indian Sports Service is created, any new All India service is created, that means now we will have more officers who are appointed by the center, trained by the center, accountable to the center, can be dismissed by the center, but where will they work? They will work in the states. So for that, we need the permission of the Rajya Sabha, because Rajya Sabha is the Council of States. When we say Rajya Sabha is the Council of State, that means it represents the interests of the states. And these are the 3 special powers of Rajya Sabha. If I were to ask you a question, who can create a new All India service? What is your answer? Who can create a new All India service? Center, Rajya Sabha, Parliament, both, center. A new All India service can be created only by the Parliament, which means Parliament will enact a law and create a new All India service. But Parliament cannot start this process unless and until Rajya Sabha passes a resolution empowering the Parliament to create a new All India service. Just like, can the Rajya Sabha pass a law under state list? No. Parliament has to pass a law under state list. Both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha has to pass a law under the state list. But Parliament cannot initiate this process unless and until Rajya Sabha approves under Article 249. These are the three special powers given to Rajya Sabha. Done? Clear? Rajya Sabha, some important points. Important points number 1. The term of Rajya Sabha MP is 6 years. What is the term of the Lok Sabha MP? The term of the Lok Sabha MP is 5 years. What is the term of the Rajya Sabha MP? Not mentioned in the constitution, but mentioned by the law passed by the parliament. And parliament has said that the term of the Rajya Sabha MP is 6 years. Second important point, 1/3 of members retire every 2 years. How? I'll discuss. Third important point, there is no SC, ST reservation in the Rajya Sabha. For example, if you look at Lok Sabha, in Lok Sabha we have got reservation. There are some seats reserved for SCs. Only SCs can be elected from these seats. There are some seats reserved for STs. Only STs can be elected from these seats. But in Rajya Sabha, there is no reservation for SCs and STs. These seats are open. But what do we mean by 1/3 of the members retire every 2 years? We say Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament. And what do we mean by Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament? That means it is not subject to dissolution. That means it cannot be dissolved. Lok Sabha can be dissolved. Rajya Sabha cannot be dissolved. Lok Sabha is dissolved once 5-year term is over. Then we will have a new Lok Sabha. That is why you must have heard 14th Lok Sabha, 15th Lok Sabha, 12th Lok Sabha, 10th Lok Sabha. You will have never heard 10th Rajya Sabha, 11th Rajya Sabha, because Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament. It is not subject to dissolution. But how do we ensure the permanent nature of Rajya Sabha? How do we ensure it? Let's say, for example, these are 245 MPs, and the year is 1952, when the Rajya Sabha is convened for the first time. Fine. And what is the term of the Rajya Sabha MP? The term is 6 years. That means 1958. The term of all these 245 MPs is over. That means on this date, Rajya Sabha is vacant. Rajya Sabha is empty. Because all these 245 MPs, their term got over. Rajya Sabha is not then the permanent house of Indian Parliament. Because it is empty. All the MPs, their term is over, expired after 6 years. To ensure that this does not happen, Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament. For that, something was done. What was done? For mathematical clarity, let's say we have 300 MPs in Rajya Sabha. What is 1/3 of 300? 100, 100, 100. Fine. 1954, and now we reach 1954. Let's call these 100A, these 100B, this 100C. Let's say we reach 1954. That means 2 years. We will ask this A block resign. Resign. And when you resign, that means there are still 200 MPs in Rajya Sabha right now, but these 100 will resign. What will these 100 do? They will contest election again. And once they are contesting the election, these people will now have a 6-year term till 1960. Clear? 2 years later, 1956, We will ask this block B, you resign. Why resign? Because you will contest election again. When? In the year 1956. So that now your term is till 1962. And now C block, you don't have to resign. Your term is over in 1954. That means 1958. That means 1958, block C, it will have the term till 1964. That means every 2 years, 1/3 of the MPs will retire. Sir, retire or resign? Retire. Why? When 1952 Rajya Sabha was constituted for the first time, and if their term is 6 years, if all of them are given the same 6-year term, then what will happen? There will come a point where Rajya Sabha is empty. Then we cannot say Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament, because Rajya Sabha has no MP right now, it is empty. To ensure this does not happen, after 2 years, in 1954, Rajya Sabha asked 1/3 of its MPs, you please retire, resign. Said, why would we resign? Please don't worry, you will contest the election again. But please you resign, so that once you are collected, once you resign, then you are elected again, you will have a 6-year term. 6-year term. And the next block will have another 6-year term. But these terms will not be concurrent. These will be 2-year difference. So that at any point in time, we don't have a vacant Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament. But why will we resign? We will not resign. Rajya Sabha said, okay, don't worry, we'll draw a lot. We'll draw chits. So chits were drawn. All those whose names appeared, they had to resign after 2 years. Then they contested election again. That means now all those states which are part of A, all those seats which are part of A block, they will be filled in 1960, then in 66, then in 72, then in 78, then in 84, then in 90. That means these seats will be filled, for example, in 2022. Then these seats will be filled in 2024. Then these seats will be filled in 2026, which means for the only 2 times initially, we drew the lots, and through these chits, we asked 1/3 of the members to resign. Now, we don't have to ask these members to resign, because all those who are now elected, they have a fixed 6-year term. That is why you see every 2 years, there is a big Rajya Sabha election, where hundreds of candidates, where more than 50 candidates are elected on a regular basis. That is what we call 1/3 of the MPs retire every 2 years. And that is how we can ensure the permanent nature of Rajya Sabha. Is that clear? Sir, how to know how many members need for Rajya Sabha for a state? That is mentioned in Schedule 4 of the Constitution. You don't have to remember. Sir, how does Parliament act as a quasi-judicial body? Because it investigates the allegations of violation of Constitution against the President. It will investigate the allegations of misbehavior and incapacity against a judge, because on that ground, the judge can be removed. Conducting an inquiry and fixing responsibility and telling, yes, President, you are guilty of violating the Constitution. That's part of the judiciary. That's the judicial role. But here, that role is played by the Parliament. So Parliament is not playing a completely judicial role, a quasi-judicial role. Sir, retirement means they can't again stand to get elected as Rajya Sabha member. No, they can contest election again. Your term is over, which means you're retired. Your term of 6 years is over. Then you can contest election again. And we have seen Dr. Manmohan Singh, for how many terms he has been Rajya Sabha MP? Many terms. So you can again come back to Rajya Sabha and get elected. Is nominated MP also retired every 2 years and appointed again? Now we don't ask these MPs to retire every 2 years. Now your term is 6 years. To ensure the permanent nature of Rajya Sabha, only for the first two times in 54 and 56, we ask some MPs to resign so that for their seats, now the term is 6 years. Now the term of Rajya Sabha MP is 6 years, complete 6 years, not 2 years. But members, since it's like India is a constituency, big constituency or a big country, there are some seats which will be filled in 2022. There are some seats which will be filled in 2024. There are some seats which will be filled in 2026. This is Rajya Sabha. And if you're elected in 2022, your term is till 2028. You are elected in 2024, your term is till 2030. You are elected in 2026, your term is till 2032, which means under no circumstance, at no point is Rajya Sabha empty. Rajya Sabha is the permanent house of Indian Parliament. Sir, please take my question. Nominated MLA also vote in MP election to Rajya Sabha. Now we don't have nominated MLAs in Legislative Assembly. We used to have. Now we don't have. What will happen if vacancy arises? Then the new member has a full term of 6 years. Let's say, for example, here in 2022, we elected X to Rajya Sabha for 6-year term. Clear? After 2 years, this person either dies or he was disqualified or he resigns. Then we have to fill this vacancy. This is what we call by-election. And the person who would be elected will be elected only for the remainder of the term. That means he will be elected only for 4 years, not for 6 years. Because the term of that seat is 6 years. Now that individual was there for 2 years. If you have to fill this vacancy again, you have to fill it for the remainder of the period, which is 4 years. So that the total term is 6 years. Okay. Have a great weekend. See you again on Monday. We'll discuss Rajya Sabha again. Then we will jump to Lok Sabha. Then we will discuss Office of Profit, what are the important bills, how these bills are introduced, passed, and all the important privileges, immunities available to the members of the parliament. See you on Monday, 6 o'clock in the morning. Till then, have a great time, great weekend, and please don't forget to attempt the tests tomorrow. And if you have any questions, should you have any questions, please get in touch with our subject matter experts till 10 o'clock, and they'll be happy to guide you. Bye-bye. Take care. All the best.